The death world of Medusa stands as one of the harshest proving grounds in the galaxy, a planet where survival demands absolute strength and unwavering determination. This volcanic nightmare of shifting tectonic plates and molten seas forged not only the hardy clans that called it home, but also shaped the destiny of one of the Emperor's greatest sons. When the infant Primarch's gestation pod crashed into Medusa's unforgiving surface, the world's brutal environment would test even his superhuman constitution in ways that would fundamentally alter his very being. Medusa's surface constantly reshapes itself through violent geological upheavals. Massive land masses drift across seas of lava, grinding against each other with thunderous collisions that shake the planet's core. The Medusan clans had adapted to this perpetual instability by developing a nomadic culture, following the predictable patterns of crustal movement and establishing temporary settlements on the more stable landmasses. These hardy people built their entire civilization around mobility and pragmatic survival, creating modular structures that could be quickly dismantled and relocated when the ground beneath their feet began its inevitable journey toward destruction. The scattered clans of Medusa lived in a state of constant competition for resources and territory. Each clan developed its own traditions and methods of warfare, but all shared common traits forged by their environment: an absolute rejection of weakness, a reverence for technological mastery, and an understanding that only the strong deserve to survive. The clans fought bitter wars over access to rare mineral deposits and stable ground, conflicts that served as brutal selection pressures, ensuring only the most capable warriors and leaders could guide their people through Medusa's endless challenges. Into this world of perpetual struggle came the infant Primarch, his pod discovered by members of Clan Avernii amid the smoking ruins of a recent volcanic eruption. The child within showed no fear of the harsh environment that would have killed any ordinary human infant within hours. Instead, he thrived in conditions that tested even the hardy Medusans, displaying strength and resilience that marked him as something far beyond mortal ken. The clan elders recognized immediately that this was no ordinary foundling, and they raised him according to their strictest traditions while watching in awe as he surpassed every expectation. The young Primarch, who would come to be known as Ferrus Manus, demonstrated an intuitive understanding of technology and metallurgy that exceeded even the most skilled Medusan craftsmen. He could work metal with his bare hands, shaping alloys and compounds in ways that seemed to defy natural law. His physical strength grew beyond all reasonable bounds, allowing him to forge weapons and tools of unprecedented quality using techniques that others could barely comprehend. More importantly, he possessed a strategic mind that could see patterns in the chaos of Medusan clan warfare, identifying opportunities and weaknesses that escaped even veteran war leaders. As Ferrus reached maturity, his reputation spread across the nomadic clans. Stories circulated of his incredible feats of strength and his ability to forge weapons that could cleave through the hardest materials. Warriors from distant clans sought him out, hoping to test their skills against this legendary figure or to commission weapons from his forge. However, it was not his craftsmanship or even his martial prowess that would define his legend, but rather his encounter with one of Medusa's most ancient and terrible inhabitants. The Great Silver Wyrm Asirnoth had terrorized the clans of Medusa for generations beyond memory. This massive serpentine creature, its scales gleaming like polished metal, dwelt in the deepest volcanic caverns where the planet's molten core met its shifting crust. Asirnoth possessed intelligence far beyond that of a mere beast, and its hide was said to be composed of living metal that could regenerate from any wound. The worm would emerge from its subterranean lairs to hunt across the surface, devouring entire clan settlements and leaving behind only slag and molten rock. No weapon forged by Medusan hands could pierce its metallic hide, and no warrior had ever faced the creature and survived to tell the tale. The legends spoke of Asirnoth's origins in the Dark Age when Medusa first formed, suggesting the creature was as old as the planet itself. Some clan shamans believed it was a guardian spirit of the world's volcanic heart, while others claimed it was a remnant of some ancient technological catastrophe that had somehow achieved a form of mechanical life. Regardless of its true nature, Asirnoth represented the ultimate challenge for any warrior seeking to prove their worth on Medusa's deadly surface. When reports reached Ferrus of the Wyrm's latest rampage, which had consumed 3 clan settlements in a single night of terror, he made the decision that would transform him forever. Armed with weapons of his own forging, and driven by a determination that burned hotter than Medusa's volcanic fires, Ferrus descended into the deep caverns to face Asirnoth in its own domain. The journey into the planet's depths took him through a maze of lava tubes and crystalline formations, past geysers of superheated gas and pools of molten metal that would have instantly killed any ordinary human. The battle between Ferrus Manus and Asirnoth lasted for days, a titanic struggle that shook the very foundations of Medusa. The worm's living metal hide proved impervious to conventional weapons, its scales deflecting even Ferrus's masterwork blades without leaving so much as a scratch. Asirnoth's size gave it tremendous advantages in the confines of the cavern system, its serpentine body allowing it to strike from multiple angles, while its metallic coils could crush stone and metal with equal ease. The creature fought with the accumulated cunning of millennia, using the cavern's natural features to its advantage and demonstrating tactical awareness that matched its physical power. Ferrus quickly realized that conventional combat would not suffice against such an opponent. The worm's living metal composition made it effectively immortal, capable of regenerating from wounds that would have felled any organic creature. Instead of continuing to rely on weapons and traditional fighting techniques, Ferrus chose a more direct approach that would test the very limits of his Primarch physiology. He grappled directly with the massive serpent, using his superhuman strength to match its crushing coils while seeking some vulnerability in its seemingly impenetrable form. The turning point came when Ferrus managed to grasp Asirnoth's head with both hands, holding the writhing creature despite the searing heat that radiated from its metallic scales. The contact triggered a transformation that neither combatant could have anticipated. The living metal that comprised Asirnoth's hide began to flow like liquid mercury, responding to some unknown property of Ferrus's touch. Rather than simply coating his hands, the necrodermis began to integrate with his flesh at the cellular level, replacing organic tissue with something far more durable and powerful. The process was agonizing, as living metal fused with bone and sinew in ways that defied biological understanding. Ferrus felt his hands transform completely, organic matter giving way to a substance that was neither fully mechanical nor entirely biological. The necrodermis flowed up his arms to his elbows, creating seamless integration between his enhanced limbs and his unchanged torso. Throughout this transformation, he maintained his grip on Asirnoth, watching as the ancient worm gradually weakened and finally died, its life essence somehow transferred into the living metal that now comprised his hands. When Ferrus emerged from the deep caverns, his appearance had been fundamentally altered. His hands and forearms now gleamed with the same silver sheen as Asirnoth's scales, but the necrodermis had adapted to his physiology in ways that surpassed the original creature's capabilities. The living metal responded to his thoughts and emotions, shifting density and hardness according to his needs. When working at his forge, the necrodermis could become malleable enough to shape the most delicate components, yet in combat it could harden to a degree that made his fists more devastating than any weapon. The transformation granted Ferrus abilities that exceeded even normal Primarch capabilities. His metallic hands could generate tremendous heat, allowing him to work metal without external tools or forge weapons with techniques impossible for ordinary smiths. The necrodermis possessed self-repair capabilities that could heal damage almost instantly, and its adaptive properties meant that it grew stronger and more sophisticated with use. Most remarkably, the living metal seemed to enhance his already formidable intellect when dealing with technological matters, granting him insights into mechanical principles and metallurgical processes that bordered on the supernatural. News of Ferrus's victory over Asirnoth spread across Medusa like wildfire, transforming him from a respected warrior into a figure of legend. The clans that had lived in terror of the Great Wyrm for countless generations now looked upon this silver-handed warrior as something approaching a god. His demonstration of power went beyond mere physical prowess, representing mastery over the very forces that had shaped their world. The living metal hands became a symbol of ultimate strength and technological supremacy, qualities that the pragmatic Medusans valued above all others. The scattered clans began to seek alliance with Ferrus, recognizing that his unique abilities and strategic genius offered them opportunities for expansion and conquest that had never before been possible. Under his leadership, the traditional pattern of endless small conflicts between clans gave way to larger campaigns of unification. Ferrus demonstrated that the clan's individual strengths could be multiplied through coordination and shared purpose, while their weaknesses could be minimized through mutual support and resource sharing. His approach to unification differed markedly from the methods employed by his brother Primarchs on other worlds. Rather than imposing a single governmental structure or demanding submission to his personal authority, Ferrus worked within existing clan traditions while gradually introducing innovations that improved their effectiveness. He established standards for weapons and equipment that allowed different clans to fight together more effectively, while creating communication networks that enabled coordinated responses to threats and opportunities across Medusa's shifting landscape. The transformation of Medusan society under Ferrus's guidance reflected his fundamental philosophy that strength must be earned through constant testing and improvement. He instituted competitions and challenges that pushed clan warriors to exceed their previous limitations, while rewarding innovation and tactical thinking alongside traditional martial prowess. The clans learned to see themselves not as isolated tribes struggling for survival, but as components of a larger machine that could accomplish goals impossible for any individual group. Ferrus's necrodermis hands became central to his role as both war leader and technological innovator. He could forge weapons and equipment with capabilities that seemed almost supernatural to his followers, creating alloys and compounds that enhanced the effectiveness of Medusan warriors beyond anything they had previously imagined. His personal weapons became legendary artifacts in their own right, tools that could cut through the hardest materials or deliver devastating impacts that could shatter stone and metal alike. The unified clans under Ferrus's leadership began to explore regions of Medusa that had previously been considered too dangerous or unstable for permanent settlement. His strategic vision identified opportunities to exploit the planet's volcanic activity for industrial purposes, establishing forge complexes in locations where geothermal energy could power manufacturing processes on an unprecedented scale. These developments transformed Medusa from a collection of struggling nomadic tribes into a unified civilization capable of producing technology and weapons that rivaled the best efforts of more advanced worlds. The Emperor's arrival on Medusa marked the beginning of a transformation that would reshape not only Ferrus Manus, but the entire 10th Legion that had been created from his genetic template. When the golden figure descended from the heavens aboard his flagship, the scattered clans of Medusa witnessed something that transcended even their newly unified understanding of power and authority. The master of mankind had come to reclaim his son, and with him brought the Space Marines who carried Ferrus's own genetic legacy within their enhanced bodies. The 10th Legion had been forged on Terra using Ferrus Manus's genetic material, but they had operated without their Primarch's direct guidance for decades of the Great Crusade. These warriors had already established themselves as formidable fighters, specializing in mechanized warfare and displaying an unusual affinity for technology that set them apart from their brother legions. Their armor bore the distinctive black and white color scheme that would become synonymous with their identity, and their tactical doctrines emphasized the integration of advanced weaponry with disciplined infantry tactics. When Ferrus first encountered his Gene sons, the meeting represented more than a simple reunion between a Primarch and his legion. The Space Marines of the 10th Legion immediately recognized something familiar in their Primarch's presence, a resonance that went beyond mere genetic compatibility. His necrodermis hands fascinated them, representing a perfect fusion of flesh and technology that spoke to inclinations they had felt but never fully understood. The living metal seemed to pulse with its own inner light as Ferrus examined his sons, and many of the Space Marines later reported sensing a subtle vibration in their own cybernetic implants during that first encounter. Ferrus wasted no time in implementing comprehensive changes to his legion's structure and philosophy. The warriors he inherited were already skilled and disciplined, but he recognized that their potential remained largely untapped. His first major reform involved the complete reorganization of the Legion's command structure to mirror the clan company system that had proven so effective on Medusa. Each company would operate with the independence and tactical flexibility of a Medusan clan, while maintaining the coordination and mutual support that had enabled the planet's unification. The Primarch's philosophy of strength through technological augmentation became the cornerstone of his Legion's new identity. Ferrus believed that the human form, even when enhanced to the superhuman level of a space marine, represented only a starting point for true power. He taught his warriors that flesh was inherently weak and prone to failure, while properly integrated technology could eliminate these limitations and unlock capabilities that organic tissue could never achieve. This was not a rejection of humanity, but rather an evolution beyond its natural constraints. Under Ferrus's guidance, the 10th Legion began to embrace cybernetic enhancement with an enthusiasm that bordered on religious devotion. Space Marines who lost limbs in battle viewed the opportunity for bionic replacement not as a necessary evil, but as a chance to become stronger and more effective than before. The Legion's Tech Marines worked closely with their battle brothers to develop augmentations that went far beyond simple replacements, creating integrated weapon systems and enhanced sensory arrays that transformed individual warriors into walking arsenals. The development of the Legion's distinctive culture proceeded rapidly as Ferrus shared the hard-won wisdom of Medusa's clans with his Gene sons. He established forge complexes within the Legion's fleet, massive industrial installations where Space Marines could craft their own weapons and equipment according to their individual needs and preferences. These forges became centers of learning and innovation, where the Primarch's teachings about the superiority of enhanced flesh over weak organic matter took physical form in the countless modifications and improvements that emerged from their workshops. Ferrus instituted a system of trials and challenges that drew heavily from Medusan tradition while adapting to the unique requirements of Space Marine training. Aspirants were required to demonstrate not only physical prowess and tactical acumen, but also technological aptitude and the mental fortitude necessary to accept extensive cybernetic modification. The trials tested every aspect of a warrior's capabilities, from their ability to endure pain during augmentation procedures to their skill in crafting the weapons they would carry into battle. The recruitment practices established by Ferrus reflected his understanding that true strength required constant testing and refinement. Rather than simply drawing recruits from a single world or system, the 10th Legion began to seek candidates from environments that would produce warriors capable of embracing their philosophy of technological enhancement. Forge worlds, hive cities with extensive cybernetic populations, and harsh industrial planets all became sources of potential Space Marines who possessed the mental flexibility necessary to view bionics as improvements rather than disfigurements. Medusa itself became the primary recruiting ground for the Legion, with the planet's clan companies serving as a constant source of candidates who had already proven themselves in the crucible of their homeworld's unforgiving environment. The young warriors who emerged from Medusa's trials carried with them an intuitive understanding of the Primarch's teachings, having grown up in a culture that valued technological mastery and rejected weakness in all its forms. These recruits often adapted to their Space Marine augmentations with remarkable ease, viewing each enhancement as a natural progression of the strength they had already developed. The integration of Medusan clan traditions with Space Marine doctrine created a unique military culture that emphasized both individual excellence and collective strength. Each clan company developed its own specializations and traditions, while maintaining the standardized equipment and tactical doctrines that enabled effective coordination with their brother units. Company commanders were expected to demonstrate not only leadership abilities, but also technical expertise, often personally crafting the weapons and equipment used by their subordinates. Ferrus encouraged competition between the clan companies, establishing contests and challenges that pushed each unit to exceed the achievements of their brothers. These competitions covered every aspect of warfare, from marksmanship and close combat to the design and construction of specialized equipment. The winners received recognition and resources that enabled them to pursue even more ambitious projects, while those who fell behind were provided with additional training and support to help them meet the Legion's exacting standards. The Primarch's emphasis on technological augmentation extended beyond simple bionics to encompass every aspect of the Legion's equipment and tactics. Space Marines were encouraged to modify their armor and weapons according to their individual preferences and combat roles, creating a diverse array of specialized configurations that maximized each warrior's effectiveness. The standard patterns of bolter, chainsword, and power armor served as starting points for endless variations and improvements, each one reflecting the creativity and technical skill of its creator. The Legion's Tech Marines occupied a position of particular importance within this culture, serving not only as maintenance specialists, but as teachers and innovators who helped their battle brothers realize their technological ambitions. These warrior engineers worked closely with the Mechanicum, but their primary loyalty remained to their Primarch and his vision of enhanced humanity. They developed new techniques for integrating cybernetic components with Space Marine physiology, creating augmentations that were specifically designed to work with the enhanced metabolism and neural architecture of the Astartes. As the 10th Legion adapted to their Primarch's teachings, they began to develop a reputation for technological innovation that rivaled even the most accomplished Forge worlds. Their ships became mobile manufacturing centers, equipped with advanced fabrication systems that could produce everything from individual weapons to entire suits of power armor. The Legion's ability to maintain and upgrade their equipment in the field gave them a significant advantage during extended campaigns, allowing them to adapt their tactics and equipment to meet changing battlefield conditions. The transformation of the 10th Legion under Ferrus Manus represented more than a simple change in tactics or equipment. The Primarch had instilled in his warriors a fundamental philosophy that would guide their actions for millennia to come, a belief that strength could only be achieved through the constant pursuit of improvement and the rejection of natural limitations. His Gene sons learned to view their bodies as works in progress, platforms for enhancement and modification that could be continuously upgraded to meet new challenges and opportunities. The Legion's growing reputation for cybernetic enhancement and technological mastery began to attract attention from other Imperial forces, particularly the Mechanicum of Mars. The Tech Priests recognized in the 10th Legion kindred spirits who shared their reverence for the machine and their belief in the superiority of augmented flesh over weak organic matter. This relationship would prove crucial in the years to come, providing the Legion with access to advanced technologies and manufacturing capabilities that enhanced their already formidable abilities. The philosophical foundation that Ferrus Manus established within the 10th Legion represented a radical departure from the beliefs held by most other Space Marine forces during the Great Crusade, where other Primarchs emphasized honor, glory, or tactical excellence as the primary virtues of their warriors. Ferrus taught that these concepts were meaningless without the underlying strength to achieve victory through superior capability. His doctrine centered on a simple but profound truth: organic flesh, regardless of genetic enhancement or training, possessed inherent limitations that could only be overcome through technological augmentation and the systematic elimination of weakness in all its forms. The core tenet of this philosophy held that weakness represented not merely a tactical disadvantage, but a moral failing that undermined the very purpose of the Great Crusade. Ferrus viewed the human form as the Emperor had originally designed it, a remarkable achievement that nonetheless remained bound by biological constraints that prevented it from reaching its true potential. The Space Marine enhancement process had pushed these boundaries significantly, but even the superhuman capabilities of the Astartes could be improved through careful integration with properly designed mechanical systems. This belief system emerged directly from Ferrus's experiences on Medusa, where survival demanded the constant pursuit of improvement and the ruthless elimination of any factor that might lead to failure. The necrodermis hands that had replaced his organic limbs served as a constant reminder of the superiority that could be achieved when flesh was enhanced or replaced with more reliable alternatives. The living metal responded to his thoughts with perfect precision, never tired, never faltered, and could adapt to any task with capabilities that exceeded what any organic limb could achieve. The Primarch's teachings emphasized that the pursuit of technological perfection was not an end in itself, but rather a means of achieving the strength necessary to fulfill humanity's destiny among the stars. Every augmentation, every replacement of organic tissue with mechanical alternatives brought a warrior closer to the ideal state where physical limitations no longer constrain their ability to serve the Emperor's vision. This philosophy created a culture within the 10th Legion where cybernetic enhancement was not merely accepted, but actively sought as a mark of dedication and wisdom. Space Marines who embraced extensive augmentation were viewed as exemplars of the Primarch's teachings, warriors who had demonstrated the courage to abandon the comfort of familiar flesh in pursuit of greater capability. Veterans who had replaced significant portions of their bodies with bionics became living embodiments of the Legion's core beliefs, their mechanical limbs and enhanced sensory systems serving as inspiration for younger warriors who had not yet had the opportunity to prove their commitment through similar modifications. The relationship between the 10th Legion and the Adeptus Mechanicus developed naturally from this shared philosophical foundation. The tech priests of Mars had long believed that flesh was weak and that the Omnissiah's true blessing could only be achieved through the integration of sacred machinery with biological systems. When they encountered Ferrus Manus and witnessed his necrodermis hands, many saw confirmation of their deepest theological beliefs made manifest in the form of a Primarch who embodied the perfect fusion of organic and mechanical elements. This alliance went far beyond simple mutual convenience or shared tactical objectives. The Mechanicus provided the 10th Legion with access to advanced augmentation technologies and manufacturing capabilities that would have been impossible to obtain through normal Imperial channels. In return, the Legion served as test subjects and field evaluators for experimental cybernetic systems, providing valuable data about the performance of various augmentation designs under combat conditions. The Space Marines' enhanced physiology and accelerated healing capabilities made them ideal candidates for procedures that would have been prohibitively dangerous for baseline humans. The veneration of machine spirits became an integral part of the Legion's spiritual practices, though their approach differed subtly from orthodox Mechanicus doctrine. Where the tech priests viewed machine spirits as separate entities that required appeasement and careful negotiation, the Space Marines of the 10th Legion learned to see them as partners in the pursuit of perfection. Their augmented warriors developed personal relationships with the machine spirits that inhabited their cybernetic components, treating them not as foreign presences, but as extensions of their own will and consciousness. This understanding manifested in the elaborate rituals that surrounded the creation and maintenance of cybernetic augmentations within the Legion. Each new bionic limb or sensory enhancement underwent extensive blessing ceremonies that involved both the recipient and the tech marines responsible for its installation. These rituals served multiple purposes. They ensured that the machine spirit was properly awakened and integrated with the warrior's biological systems. They demonstrated respect for the sacred technology being employed, and they reinforced the philosophical principles that made such augmentation desirable rather than merely necessary. The training doctrines established by Ferrus Manus reflected his belief that emotional responses represented a form of weakness that could compromise tactical effectiveness. Warriors who allowed anger, fear, or pride to influence their decision-making processes were more likely to make errors that could result in mission failure or unnecessary casualties. The Primarch taught his Space Marines to approach warfare with the same methodical precision that characterized the operation of a well-designed machine, analyzing each situation according to logical parameters and selecting the most efficient solution regardless of personal preferences or emotional inclinations. This emphasis on logical analysis extended to every aspect of military planning and execution. Space Marines were trained to evaluate battlefield conditions using systematic approaches that considered factors such as terrain advantages, enemy capabilities, resource availability, and mission objectives without allowing subjective judgments to cloud their assessment. The goal was to achieve a state of tactical clarity where decisions could be made with the same reliability and precision that characterized the operation of their cybernetic augmentations. The suppression of emotion did not mean the elimination of all human responses, but rather their subordination to rational analysis and strategic thinking. Ferrus recognized that emotions could serve useful purposes when properly channeled and controlled, providing motivation and determination that pure logic alone might lack. However, he insisted that these responses must never be allowed to override careful planning or compromise the systematic approach that maximized chances of success in any given situation. Training exercises within the 10th Legion incorporated scenarios specifically designed to test warriors' ability to maintain logical thinking under extreme stress. Space Marines might be required to make tactical decisions while experiencing simulated pain from malfunctioning augmentations, or to coordinate complex maneuvers while dealing with equipment failures that would normally trigger frustration or concern. These exercises taught the warriors to treat such challenges as data points to be processed and addressed rather than obstacles that might provoke emotional responses. The concept of brutal efficiency became central to the Legion's approach to warfare, reflecting Ferrus's understanding that the most effective solution to any tactical problem was often the most direct one. Complex strategies that relied on deception, misdirection, or psychological warfare were viewed with suspicion, not because they were inherently flawed, but because they introduced variables that could not be controlled with the same precision as straightforward applications of superior firepower and tactical coordination. This philosophy manifested in the Legion's preference for direct assault tactics supported by overwhelming technological superiority. Rather than attempting to outmaneuver opponents through clever positioning or surprise attacks, the 10th Legion typically sought to identify the enemy's primary strengths and then deploy sufficient force to neutralize those advantages through superior equipment and systematic application of firepower. Their augmented warriors could execute these tactics with mechanical precision, advancing under fire with the steady determination of walking siege engines. The integration of cybernetic enhancement with tactical doctrine created unique opportunities for coordination and communication that other legions could not match. Space Marines with enhanced sensory systems could share battlefield data through direct neural links, creating a level of situational awareness that approached the omniscience of a single distributed consciousness. Warriors with augmented limbs could operate heavy weapons with stability and precision that would have been impossible using organic muscle and bone, while those with mechanical replacements for damaged organs could continue fighting under conditions that would have incapacitated unmodified Space Marines. These capabilities reinforced the Primarch's teachings about the superiority of enhanced flesh over purely organic alternatives. Each successful engagement where augmented warriors outperformed their unmodified counterparts provided additional evidence for the philosophical principles that guided the Legion's development. Space Marines who witnessed the effectiveness of their cybernetically enhanced brothers often requested similar modifications, viewing them not as necessary accommodations for injury, but as improvements that would make them more effective servants of the Emperor's will. The Legion's approach to equipment maintenance and modification reflected the same systematic thinking that characterized their tactical doctrines. Every weapon, every piece of armor, every vehicle in their arsenal was subject to constant evaluation and improvement according to logical principles that prioritized reliability and effectiveness over aesthetic considerations or traditional designs. This process created a culture of innovation where Space Marines were encouraged to identify weaknesses in their equipment and develop solutions that addressed these problems through technological enhancement rather than tactical accommodation. The workshops and forge complexes that supported this philosophy became centers of learning where the practical application of the Primarch's teachings could be observed and refined. Space Marines worked alongside Tech Marines and visiting Tech Priests to develop new augmentation techniques and equipment modifications, sharing knowledge and expertise in ways that accelerated the pace of technological advancement throughout the Legion. These collaborative efforts produced innovations that benefited not only the 10th Legion, but also other Imperial forces that adopted their designs and techniques. The relationships that Ferrus Manus forged with his brother Primarchs during the Great Crusade reflected the same methodical approach he applied to warfare and technological innovation. Unlike some of his more gregarious brothers who formed bonds through shared ideals or emotional connections, Ferrus evaluated his fellow Gene sons according to their tactical capabilities, strategic thinking, and commitment to the Emperor's vision of human expansion across the galaxy. This analytical approach to brotherhood created some of the strongest partnerships in the Imperium, while also establishing tensions with Primarchs whose methods or philosophies conflicted with his own systematic worldview. The most significant of these relationships developed with Fulgrim of the 3rd Legion, a bond that transcended simple military cooperation to become one of the defining friendships of the Great Crusade era. The two Primarchs first encountered each other during a joint compliance operation in the Colline system, where their legions were tasked with bringing a cluster of technologically advanced human colonies back into Imperial fold. What began as a routine coordination meeting between two military commanders quickly evolved into something far more complex and meaningful, as both Primarchs recognized qualities in the other that complemented their own strengths and challenged their assumptions about the nature of perfection. Fulgrim's pursuit of aesthetic and cultural perfection initially seemed to conflict with Ferrus's emphasis on technological superiority and the elimination of weakness through augmentation. Where the Emperor's children sought to achieve flawless execution of classical military tactics and maintained equipment that was as beautiful as it was functional, the 10th Legion prioritized brutal efficiency and viewed ornamentation as unnecessary distraction from practical capability. However, both Primarchs shared an underlying drive for improvement and refinement that created common ground despite their different approaches to achieving excellence. The legendary competitions that developed between Ferrus and Fulgrim became focal points for their friendship, elaborate contests that tested every aspect of their superhuman capabilities, while providing opportunities for each to learn from the other's methods. These challenges ranged from traditional martial contests using bladed weapons to complex engineering problems that required both technical knowledge and creative problem solving. Fulgrim's mastery of swordsmanship pushed Ferrus to develop combat techniques that better utilized his necrodermis hands, while Ferrus's technological innovations inspired Fulgrim to seek perfection in the mechanical aspects of warfare, as well as its artistic elements. One particularly memorable contest involved the creation of matching weapons, with each Primarch crafting a blade for the other using techniques that reflected their individual philosophies, while meeting their brother's specific requirements. Ferrus forged a sword for Fulgrim that incorporated molecular-level structural modifications that made the weapon virtually unbreakable, while maintaining the perfect balance and elegant lines that the Emperor's children Primarch demanded. In return, Fulgrim created a weapon for Ferrus that demonstrated how aesthetic considerations could enhance rather than compromise functional effectiveness, with decorative elements that actually improved the blade's aerodynamics and structural integrity. These collaborative efforts revealed the depth of mutual respect that existed between the two Primarchs, despite their different approaches to achieving excellence. Fulgrim appreciated Ferrus's unwavering commitment to improvement and his willingness to accept painful modifications in pursuit of greater capability, while Ferrus recognized that his brother's pursuit of perfection required the same dedication and systematic effort that characterized his own technological innovations. Their friendship became a model for cooperation between legions with different specializations, demonstrating how diverse approaches to warfare could complement rather than compete with each other. The professional relationships that Ferrus developed with tactically minded Primarchs like Robute Guilliman reflected his appreciation for systematic thinking and logical analysis in military planning. During joint campaigns, Ferrus found himself naturally aligned with commanders who approached warfare as a science that could be studied, analyzed, and perfected through careful application of proven principles. Guilliman's development of the Codex Astartes represented exactly the kind of systematic approach to military doctrine that Ferrus valued, though he disagreed with some of the specific tactical recommendations that prioritized flexibility over overwhelming force. The collaboration between the 10th and 13th Legions during the Gardenal campaign demonstrated how effectively their different strengths could be integrated when both Primarchs focused on achieving tactical objectives rather than defending their individual approaches to warfare. Guilliman's strategic planning identified the optimal sequence of targets and resource allocation needed to bring the rebellious system into compliance, while Ferrus's technological expertise provided solutions to specific tactical challenges that had initially seemed insurmountable. The 10th Legion's augmented warriors could operate in environments that would have been prohibitive for unmodified Space Marines, while the Ultramarines' disciplined formations provided the coordination and support needed to exploit these capabilities effectively. These joint operations revealed Ferrus's ability to subordinate his personal preferences to broader strategic requirements when working with commanders whose competence he respected. Unlike his sometimes difficult relationships with more emotional or ideologically driven brothers, his partnerships with analytically minded Primarchs proceeded smoothly because all parties could agree on objective criteria for evaluating tactical options and measuring success. The absence of ego-driven conflicts allowed these collaborations to achieve results that exceeded what either legion could have accomplished independently. However, Ferrus's relationships with more spiritually inclined or emotionally driven Primarchs often proved more challenging, particularly his interactions with Sanguinius of the 9th Legion and Lorgar Aurelian of the 17th Legion. The fundamental differences in their approaches to leadership and warfare created tensions that persisted throughout the Great Crusade, despite their shared loyalty to the Emperor and commitment to human expansion across the galaxy. These conflicts reflected deeper philosophical disagreements about the nature of humanity and the methods that should be used to achieve the Imperium's objectives. Sanguinius's emphasis on inspiration and emotional connection with his warriors struck Ferrus as potentially dangerous, introducing variables that could compromise tactical effectiveness when rational analysis was most needed. The Blood Angel's tendency to fight with passionate intensity rather than methodical precision seemed to invite the kind of errors that systematic planning was designed to prevent. While Ferrus acknowledged the effectiveness of Sanguinius's methods in many situations, he remained concerned that relying on emotional responses might lead to catastrophic failures when facing opponents who could exploit such predictable reactions. The tension between their approaches became apparent during the Melchior Compliance, where both legions were deployed to bring a particularly stubborn human colony back into Imperial control. The Blood Angels' aggressive assault tactics achieved rapid initial success, but their emotional investment in the campaign led to tactical decisions that Ferrus considered unnecessarily risky. When Sanguinius ordered his warriors to pursue retreating enemy forces into defensive positions that had not been properly reconnoitered, Ferrus intervened with his own forces to provide the systematic fire support that the situation actually required, preventing what could have been a costly tactical disaster. The aftermath of this incident highlighted the fundamental differences in their command philosophies without creating lasting animosity between the two Primarchs. Sanguinius acknowledged that Ferrus's intervention had been tactically sound, while Ferrus recognized that the Blood Angel's aggressive approach had created the opportunity that his own more methodical tactics had then exploited. However, the underlying tension persisted because both Primarchs remained convinced that their own methods represented the most reliable path to victory in the long term. Ferrus's relationship with Lorgar proved even more problematic, as the word-bearer's Primarch's emphasis on religious devotion and spiritual inspiration conflicted directly with the 10th Legion's focus on technological advancement and logical analysis. Lorgar's tendency to view military campaigns as opportunities for spreading imperial truth and converting populations to proper worship of the Emperor seemed to Ferrus like a dangerous distraction from the primary objective of achieving compliance through superior force and systematic occupation. The time and resources that the 17th Legion devoted to establishing elaborate religious ceremonies and indoctrination programs could have been better spent on fortifying conquered territories and preparing for the next phase of expansion. The philosophical differences between Ferrus and Lorgar became particularly apparent during joint planning sessions for major compliance operations. Where Ferrus advocated for direct assault tactics supported by overwhelming technological superiority, Lorgar preferred approaches that emphasized conversion and persuasion, viewing military force as a last resort that should be employed only when other methods had failed. These disagreements often required intervention from other Primarchs or direct guidance from the Emperor's representatives to resolve, as both commanders remained convinced that their approach would achieve better long-term results. Despite these tensions, Ferrus maintained professional working relationships with all of his brother Primarchs during major Great Crusade operations. His role in Primarch war councils reflected his reputation for systematic analysis and technological expertise, with other commanders frequently seeking his input on matters related to equipment, logistics, and the technical aspects of siege warfare. The 10th Legion's manufacturing capabilities and advanced augmentation technologies made them valuable allies even for Primarchs whose tactical philosophies differed significantly from Ferrus's own approaches. The strategic planning sessions that preceded major campaigns often showcased Ferrus's ability to identify practical solutions to complex logistical and tactical challenges. His understanding of supply chain management, equipment maintenance, and the technical requirements for sustained military operations made him an invaluable contributor to the detailed planning that major compliance actions required. Other Primarchs learned to appreciate his systematic approach to problem solving, even when they disagreed with his broader philosophical positions about the nature of warfare and human enhancement. Ferrus's contributions to these planning sessions typically focused on the practical aspects of campaign execution rather than grand strategic objectives or political considerations. He would analyze proposed battle plans according to logistical feasibility, identifying potential equipment failures, supply shortages, or technical problems that could compromise operational effectiveness. His recommendations often involved modifications to standard tactical approaches that would better utilize available technological advantages or compensate for known weaknesses in Imperial equipment and doctrine. The respect that other Primarchs developed for Ferrus's analytical capabilities created opportunities for influence that extended beyond his direct command authority. Even commanders who disagreed with his philosophical positions would incorporate his technical recommendations into their operational planning, recognizing that his systematic approach to problem solving could improve their chances of success regardless of their preferred tactical methods. This influence allowed Ferrus to promote his beliefs about the importance of technological superiority and systematic planning throughout the wider Great Crusade effort, even when working with legions that did not share the 10th Legion's emphasis on cybernetic enhancement and mechanical perfection. The Great Crusade provided Ferrus Manus with the vast canvas upon which to demonstrate the tactical doctrines and technological superiority that he had developed during his years unifying Medusa. As the 10th Legion joined the Emperor's grand expansion across the galaxy, their systematic approach to warfare and emphasis on overwhelming technological advantage proved devastatingly effective against the diverse array of human and Xeno civilizations that stood in the path of Imperial progress. The campaigns that followed showcased not only Ferrus's strategic genius, but also the unique capabilities that his augmented warriors brought to the complex military challenges of galactic conquest. The compliance of Forge Worlds represented some of the 10th Legion's most significant early victories during the Great Crusade, operations that demonstrated their particular aptitude for campaigns against technologically sophisticated opponents. The Kievar system presented exactly the kind of challenge that played to the Legion's strengths, featuring a collection of heavily industrialized worlds whose populations had developed advanced manufacturing capabilities and defensive technologies during the long centuries of isolation from Terra. The system's primary Forge world maintained orbital defense platforms equipped with plasma batteries and void shields that had successfully repelled previous Imperial expeditions, while the secondary worlds operated extensive networks of automated defense systems that made conventional assault tactics prohibitively costly. Ferrus's approach to the Kievar compliance exemplified his methodical analysis of tactical problems and his willingness to commit whatever resources were necessary to achieve decisive victory. Rather than attempting to overwhelm the system's defenses through repeated frontal assaults, he deployed the 10th Legion's manufacturing capabilities to construct specialized siege equipment specifically designed to neutralize the technological advantages that the defenders possessed. His warriors established forward bases on asteroids throughout the system, using their portable forge complexes to produce boarding torpedoes with enhanced armor plating and electromagnetic pulse warheads that could disable the defensive systems protecting orbital installations. The siege of Kievar's primary orbital platform demonstrated the effectiveness of the 10th Legion's integrated approach to technological warfare. Ferrus coordinated simultaneous attacks against multiple defensive positions, using his augmented Space Marine's enhanced sensory capabilities to identify weaknesses in the platform's shield generators and power distribution systems. The boarding parties that penetrated the station's hull included warriors with specialized cybernetic modifications that allowed them to interface directly with the facility's control systems, turning the defenders' own automated weapons against them, while systematically dismantling the technological infrastructure that made resistance possible. The ground campaign that followed the orbital victory showcased the 10th Legion's mastery of mechanized warfare against heavily fortified positions. The Forge world's surface bristled with defensive installations that incorporated the most advanced military technologies available to the system's inhabitants, including energy barriers that could deflect conventional weapons fire and automated turret systems with targeting capabilities that exceeded standard Imperial equipment. Ferrus deployed his Legion's Predator tanks and Dreadnought walkers in coordinated formations that maximized their firepower while minimizing exposure to defensive systems, using the superior range and penetration of their weapons to systematically eliminate enemy strongpoints from positions that conventional forces could not have maintained. The integration of Tech Marine specialists with standard tactical squads proved crucial during the urban fighting that characterized the later phases of the Kievar compliance. These warrior engineers could rapidly assess and neutralize the sophisticated booby traps and automated defense systems that the defenders had integrated into their city infrastructure, while their understanding of machine spirits allowed them to communicate with captured enemy equipment and reprogram it for Imperial use. The combination of technical expertise with standard Space Marine combat capabilities created tactical opportunities that would have been impossible for conventional forces to exploit, allowing the 10th Legion to advance through defended urban areas with minimal casualties, while preserving valuable industrial infrastructure for future Imperial use. The successful compliance of Kievar established patterns that would characterize many of the 10th Legion's subsequent campaigns against technologically advanced civilizations. Ferrus consistently demonstrated his ability to analyze enemy capabilities systematically and develop specific countermeasures that neutralized their advantages while exploiting weaknesses that less methodical commanders might have overlooked. His warriors' cybernetic enhancements and technological expertise made them ideally suited for operations against opponents who relied on sophisticated equipment and automated systems, as their augmented capabilities allowed them to operate effectively in environments that would have challenged purely organic forces. The Gardenal campaign provided opportunities for the 10th Legion to demonstrate their effectiveness in joint operations with other Imperial forces, particularly their collaboration with the Ultramarines during the systematic reduction of a rebellious human empire that had developed significant military capabilities during its isolation from Terra. The campaign required coordination between multiple Legion elements and supporting Imperial army units across a theater of operations that spanned dozens of star systems, each presenting unique tactical challenges that demanded different approaches and specialized equipment. Ferrus's contribution to the overall strategic planning demonstrated his understanding of logistics and supply chain management on a galactic scale. He identified critical manufacturing centers within the rebellious territory that could be captured and converted to Imperial use, providing the production capacity needed to sustain extended military operations while denying resources to enemy forces. The 10th Legion's portable forge complexes proved invaluable during these operations, allowing Imperial forces to maintain and upgrade their equipment without relying on supply lines that stretched across hostile territory. The tactical innovations that emerged from the Gardenal campaign reflected the systematic approach that characterized all of Ferrus's military planning. His warriors developed new techniques for coordinating mechanized assaults with orbital bombardment, using their enhanced sensory systems to provide precise targeting data that maximized the effectiveness of fleet-based fire support while minimizing the risk of friendly fire incidents. The integration of augmented space marines with conventional Imperial army units created combined arms formations that could exploit the strengths of both force types while compensating for their individual limitations. The Siege of Gardenal Prime demonstrated the 10th Legion's ability to adapt their technological advantages to overcome defensive preparations that had been specifically designed to counter Imperial assault tactics. The planet's defenders had studied reports from previous Imperial campaigns and constructed fortifications that incorporated countermeasures against standard Space Marine equipment and tactics. Their defensive positions featured overlapping fields of fire, redundant communication systems, and hardened bunkers that could withstand conventional orbital bombardment while maintaining the ability to coordinate effective resistance against ground assaults. Ferrus's response to these defensive preparations showcased his ability to develop innovative solutions to complex tactical problems. Rather than accepting the casualties that direct assault would have required, he deployed his Legion's dreadnought walkers in specialized configurations that had been modified specifically for siege warfare. These ancient warriors, their sarcophagi housing the preserved remains of fallen heroes, carried weapons systems that had been enhanced with targeting systems and ammunition types designed to penetrate the specific defensive technologies that the enemy had deployed. The breakthrough at Gardenal Prime came when Ferrus personally led a spearhead formation of heavily augmented veterans through the primary defensive line, using his necrodermis hands to physically tear apart fortified positions that had resisted conventional weapons. His ability to interface directly with enemy technology allowed him to disable defensive systems from within, creating gaps in the fortification network that his warriors could exploit with their characteristic methodical precision. The systematic reduction of the planet's defensive grid demonstrated the effectiveness of combining superhuman physical capabilities with technological expertise and careful tactical planning. The compliance of the Diasporix fleet represented one of the 10th Legion's most challenging campaigns, requiring them to adapt their technological advantages to the unique demands of void warfare against a nomadic civilization that had developed advanced defensive capabilities during centuries of wandering through the galaxy. The Diasporix had created a mobile society aboard a collection of massive vessels that incorporated both human and Xenos technologies, presenting Imperial forces with opponents who could not be defeated through conventional planetary assault tactics. The extended Void campaign that followed initial contact with the Diasporic's fleet showcased Ferrus's understanding of the strategic implications of technological integration between different species. The enemy vessels incorporated design elements and weapon systems that had been developed by multiple alien civilizations, creating hybrid technologies that possessed capabilities that exceeded what either human or Xenos engineering could have achieved independently. This technological synthesis represented exactly the kind of innovation that the Great Crusade was designed to prevent, as it demonstrated the potential for human advancement through cooperation with alien species rather than their systematic extermination. Ferrus's tactical response to the Diasporic's threat involved the development of specialized boarding tactics that could overcome the unique defensive systems protecting the enemy fleet. His warriors underwent extensive modifications to their standard equipment and augmentations, receiving enhanced void suits and magnetic anchoring systems that allowed them to operate effectively in the zero-gravity environments where much of the fighting took place. The integration of these specialized systems with their existing cybernetic enhancements created capabilities that conventional Space Marines could not have matched, allowing the 10th Legion to maintain tactical effectiveness under conditions that would have severely compromised unmodified forces. The final assault on the Diasporic's command vessel demonstrated the culmination of tactical innovations that had emerged throughout the extended campaign. Ferrus led a boarding party composed entirely of heavily augmented veterans, warriors whose cybernetic modifications had been specifically configured for the unique challenges of fighting aboard an enemy vessel that incorporated alien technologies. The boarding torpedoes that delivered these warriors to their target had been modified with enhanced armor plating and specialized cutting tools that could penetrate the exotic materials used in the ship's construction. The systematic reduction of the Diasporic's fleet provided valuable intelligence about Xenos technologies and their potential applications in Imperial systems, information that would prove crucial for future campaigns against alien civilizations. However, the campaign also highlighted the challenges inherent in fighting opponents who had embraced technological integration between different species, as their hybrid systems often possessed capabilities that could not be easily countered using standard Imperial equipment and tactics. The lessons learned during these operations would influence the 10th Legion's approach to similar challenges throughout the remainder of the Great Crusade. The Rust campaign against the silicon-based lifeforms of the Grendel system presented the 10th Legion with opponents whose very nature challenged conventional understanding of biology and technology. These crystalline entities had developed civilization based on principles that differed fundamentally from organic life, creating structures and weapons that operated according to physical laws that seemed to defy standard Imperial scientific knowledge. The campaign required Ferrus to develop entirely new tactical approaches that could deal effectively with enemies whose capabilities and limitations bore no resemblance to any previous opponents. The initial reconnaissance of the Grendel system revealed the scope of the challenge that awaited Imperial forces. The silicon-based entities had constructed massive crystalline cities that grew from the planet's surfaces like geometric forests, their structures incorporating resonance frequencies that could shatter conventional materials while remaining impervious to standard weapons fire. The aliens themselves existed as collective intelligences that could transfer their consciousness between different crystalline matrices, making them effectively immortal unless their entire network could be simultaneously destroyed. Ferrus's solution to the unique challenges posed by the silicon entities involved the development of specialized sonic weapons that could disrupt the resonance frequencies that held their crystalline structures together. His tech marines worked with mechanicus specialists to create harmonic disruptors that could be integrated with standard Space Marine equipment, allowing individual warriors to carry weapons capable of shattering enemy structures and disrupting the consciousness transfer processes that made the aliens so difficult to eliminate permanently. The ground campaign that followed demonstrated the effectiveness of systematic analysis and technological adaptation in overcoming seemingly insurmountable tactical challenges. The 10th Legion's augmented warriors proved capable of operating effectively in the crystalline cities despite the hostile environment, their cybernetic modifications providing protection against the sonic attacks that the silicon entities used as their primary weapons. The integration of specialized equipment with their existing augmentations created capabilities that allowed them to fight effectively against opponents whose very nature defied conventional military doctrine. The transformation that had replaced Ferrus Manus's organic hands with living necrodermis fundamentally altered his capabilities as a warrior, creating a fusion of Primarch physiology with ancient technology that exceeded even the extraordinary standards of his gene-engineered brothers. The metallic appendages responded to his neural impulses with perfect precision, their adaptive properties allowing them to shift between states of matter that ranged from liquid flexibility to adamantine hardness within milliseconds. When Ferrus clenched his fists in preparation for combat, the necrodermis would flow and solidify into configurations optimized for the specific type of violence he intended to unleash, whether that involved crushing enemy armor with bare-handed strikes or manipulating delicate technological systems with surgical precision. The living metal's integration with his nervous system created sensory feedback that surpassed anything organic tissue could provide. Ferrus could feel the molecular structure of materials he touched, instantly analyzing their composition and identifying structural weaknesses that could be exploited in combat. When grappling with armored opponents, this capability allowed him to locate joints and stress points in their protection with unerring accuracy, applying precisely calculated force to shatter ceramic plates or tear apart power armor systems that would have resisted conventional attacks. The necrodermis hands could generate tremendous heat through controlled molecular agitation, enabling him to melt through enemy weapons or fuse damaged equipment back together during the brief pauses between combat engagements. The adaptive nature of the living metal meant that Ferrus's hands could reconfigure themselves to match the requirements of any tactical situation. During ranged combat, the necrodermis could extend into blade-like projections that could deflect incoming projectiles with minimal effort, while close-quarters fighting saw them reshape into crushing implements that could pulverize bone and metal with equal ease. The hands retained perfect tactile sensitivity regardless of their current configuration, allowing Ferrus to maintain his legendary skill with weapons and tools while possessing the option to engage enemies with his bare hands when circumstances demanded more direct approaches. The psychological impact of the necrodermis hands extended far beyond their practical combat applications. Enemy warriors who witnessed Ferrus tear apart their comrades with metallic appendages that seemed to flow like liquid mercury while maintaining the crushing power of industrial machinery often experienced a breakdown in morale that preceded their physical destruction. The sight of a Primarch whose hands gleamed with unnatural silver light as he systematically dismantled fortified positions or crushed enemy vehicles with his bare grip became one of the most feared spectacles on Great Crusade battlefields, inspiring legends among both Imperial forces and their opponents about the Iron Hand's Primarch's supernatural capabilities. The integration of necrodermis technology with Primarch physiology created synergistic effects that enhanced Ferrus's already formidable combat abilities in ways that exceeded simple addition of mechanical augmentation to organic capability. His enhanced healing factor worked in conjunction with the living metal's self-repair functions, allowing him to recover from injuries that would have permanently crippled even other Primarchs. When enemy weapons managed to damage the necrodermis hands, the living metal would flow back together within moments, while his enhanced metabolism provided the energy needed to fuel the reconstruction process, creating a feedback loop that made him increasingly difficult to defeat through conventional damage accumulation. The legendary thunder hammer known as Forgebreaker represented the pinnacle of collaborative craftsmanship between two Primarchs whose friendship transcended their different approaches to achieving perfection. Fulgrim had conceived the weapon as a gift that would complement his brother's unique capabilities, while demonstrating the Emperor's children's mastery of both aesthetic and functional design principles. The hammer's construction incorporated techniques that pushed the boundaries of what was possible with available materials and manufacturing processes, creating a weapon that served as both a devastating implement of war and a masterwork of technological artistry. The weapon's head consisted of a massive block of rare metals that had been forged using techniques that incorporated both conventional metallurgy and more esoteric processes that bordered on the arcane. The striking surface featured molecular-level modifications that concentrated kinetic energy into focused impact points, while the hammer's core contained a miniaturized power field generator that could be activated to enhance the weapon's destructive potential beyond what its physical mass alone could achieve. The energy field created a disruption effect that could penetrate even the most sophisticated defensive systems, making Forgebreaker capable of destroying targets that would have resisted conventional weapons regardless of the force applied. The hammer's handle incorporated design elements that specifically accommodated Ferrus's necrodermis hands, with grip surfaces that could interface directly with the living metal to create a connection that transcended simple physical contact. When Ferrus wielded Forgebreaker, the weapon became an extension of his will in ways that conventional tools could never achieve, responding to his intentions with the same precision that characterized his metallic appendages. The integration allowed him to modulate the weapon's power output and impact characteristics according to tactical requirements, delivering precise strikes that could disable enemy equipment without destroying valuable technology or unleashing devastating attacks that could level fortified structures. The Thunder Hammer's weight and balance had been calculated to complement Ferrus's superhuman strength and combat style, creating a weapon that felt perfectly natural in his hands despite its massive proportions. The Primarch could wield Forgebreaker with single-handed ease when tactical situations required the use of his free hand for other purposes, or employed two-handed grips that concentrated his full strength into attacks that could shatter the heaviest armor or demolish reinforced barriers. The weapon's momentum characteristics allowed him to chain attacks together in fluid combinations that maintained constant pressure on opponents while building kinetic energy that made each successive strike more devastating than the last. The power field generator that formed Forgebreaker's core could be configured for different operational modes that adapted the weapon's capabilities to specific tactical requirements. The standard setting produced a disruption field that enhanced the hammer's penetrating power without creating excessive collateral damage, making it suitable for combat in environments where precision was more important than raw destructive potential. Combat situations that demanded maximum firepower could trigger overcharge modes that dramatically increased the weapon's energy output, creating impacts that could breach fortress walls or destroy heavily armored vehicles with single strikes. The Thunder Hammer's construction incorporated self-maintenance systems that worked in conjunction with Ferrus's necrodermis hands to ensure optimal performance under combat conditions. The weapon could diagnose its own mechanical status and communicate maintenance requirements directly to the Primarch through neural interfaces, while minor repairs could be accomplished through direct manipulation of the hammer's internal systems using the living metal's molecular control capabilities. This integration meant that Forgebreaker remained at peak effectiveness throughout extended campaigns, requiring only minimal support from Techmarine specialists even during the most demanding operational conditions. The combat doctrine that Ferrus developed around his enhanced capabilities emphasized the systematic application of overwhelming force to achieve decisive tactical results with minimal resource expenditure. His approach to warfare reflected the same methodical thinking that characterized his technological innovations, analyzing battlefield conditions according to logical parameters and selecting solutions that maximized effectiveness while minimizing variables that could compromise mission success. The Primarch viewed combat as an engineering problem that could be solved through the proper application of superior capabilities and systematic elimination of enemy advantages. Ferrus's tactical philosophy centered on the concept of technological supremacy as the foundation for military success, believing that properly equipped and augmented forces could overcome any opponent regardless of numerical disadvantages or defensive preparations. His battle plans typically involved detailed analysis of enemy capabilities and the development of specific countermeasures that neutralized their strengths while exploiting weaknesses that less systematic commanders might overlook. The 10th Legion's manufacturing capabilities and advanced augmentation technologies provided the tools needed to implement these solutions, creating tactical advantages that conventional forces could not match. The integration of overwhelming firepower with methodical tactical execution became the hallmark of Iron Hand's combat operations under Ferrus's leadership. Rather than relying on inspiration, surprise, or psychological warfare to achieve victory, the Primarch preferred approaches that concentrated superior technology and disciplined execution against carefully selected targets. His warriors advanced across battlefields with the inexorable determination of industrial machinery, systematically eliminating enemy positions while maintaining formations that maximized their technological advantages and minimized exposure to counterattacks. The emphasis on methodical destruction reflected Ferrus's understanding that emotional responses and tactical improvisation introduced variables that could compromise operational effectiveness when facing sophisticated opponents. His Space Marines learned to approach combat with the same systematic precision that characterized their technological modifications, analyzing threats according to established parameters and responding with predetermined solutions that had been tested and refined through extensive training. This approach created a level of tactical reliability that allowed the 10th Legion to maintain effectiveness even under conditions that would have challenged more flexible but less systematic forces. Ferrus's leadership style on the battlefield combined personal example with systematic coordination of his forces' technological advantages. The Primarch typically positioned himself at points where his individual combat capabilities could have maximum impact on overall tactical outcomes, whether that involved breaching enemy fortifications that conventional weapons could not penetrate or eliminating specific threats that posed dangers to his warriors' systematic advance. His presence on the front lines served both practical and inspirational purposes, demonstrating the effectiveness of technological enhancement while providing direct command authority where it could influence critical tactical decisions. The coordination between Ferrus's personal combat actions and his legion's broader tactical movements reflected careful planning that treated individual engagements as components of larger strategic objectives. When the Primarch engaged enemy champions or destroyed key defensive positions, these actions were timed to coincide with coordinated assaults by his Space Marines that could exploit the opportunities created by his intervention. The integration of superhuman individual capability with disciplined unit tactics created synergistic effects that exceeded what either approach could have achieved independently. The reputation that Ferrus earned as an implacable and merciless warrior emerged from his systematic approach to eliminating opposition rather than any particular cruelty or sadistic tendencies. His combat methods focused on achieving tactical objectives through the most efficient means available, which often involved the complete destruction of enemy forces that could not be neutralized through less extreme measures. The Primarch viewed mercy as a luxury that could only be afforded when it did not compromise mission success or endanger his warriors, leading to tactical decisions that prioritized effectiveness over humanitarian considerations. The psychological impact of Ferrus's combat reputation extended far beyond the immediate battlefield effects of his personal interventions. Enemy commanders who faced the prospect of fighting the Iron Hand's Primarch often found their tactical planning compromised by the knowledge that conventional defensive measures would be insufficient to stop his advance. The systematic nature of his approach to warfare meant that opponents could not rely on luck, inspiration, or tactical surprises to achieve victory, forcing them to confront the reality that only superior technology and disciplined execution could hope to match his capabilities. The methodical precision that characterized Ferrus's combat style created a form of psychological warfare that was perhaps more effective than more dramatic approaches employed by some of his brother Primarchs. While other Gene-sons might inspire terror through displays of supernatural fury or otherworldly power, Ferrus generated a different kind of fear through his demonstration that resistance was not merely dangerous but ultimately futile. His systematic destruction of enemy positions and implacable advance through their defensive lines conveyed the message that opposition to imperial expansion was not a heroic gesture, but simply a delay in the inevitable outcome. The first signs of corruption within the Imperium manifested not as dramatic revelations or sudden betrayals, but as subtle shifts in behavior and doctrine that only the most observant commanders recognized as harbingers of the catastrophe to come. Ferrus Manus, with his systematic approach to analyzing patterns and his methodical evaluation of his brother Primarch's capabilities, began to notice inconsistencies in their actions and decisions that troubled his logical mind. The changes were often minor, tactical choices that seemed slightly off, philosophical discussions that veered into uncomfortable territory, or equipment modifications that served no apparent practical purpose. However, these small deviations from established patterns accumulated into a growing sense of unease that Ferrus could not entirely dismiss despite his preference for concrete evidence over intuitive concerns. The Primarch's observations during joint campaign planning sessions revealed subtle but persistent changes in how some of his brothers approached their military responsibilities. Commanders who had previously demonstrated unwavering commitment to efficient tactical solutions began advocating for approaches that seemed to prioritize personal glory or aesthetic considerations over practical effectiveness. Strategic discussions that had once focused on resource allocation and logistical planning increasingly included debates about philosophical principles and abstract concepts that had little bearing on immediate military objectives. These shifts in priorities struck Ferrus as dangerous distractions from the systematic prosecution of the Great Crusade, introducing variables that could compromise operational effectiveness when facing determined opposition. The growing emphasis on individual achievement and personal recognition among several legions conflicted directly with Ferrus's understanding of proper military hierarchy and disciplined execution. He witnessed Primarchs making tactical decisions that seemed designed to showcase their own capabilities rather than maximize their force's collective effectiveness, pursuing objectives that offered opportunities for dramatic personal intervention rather than selecting targets that would contribute most efficiently to broader strategic goals. This trend toward self-aggrandizement appeared to be spreading through the officer corps of multiple legions, creating command structures that prioritized charismatic leadership over systematic planning and technological superiority. The philosophical discussions that occurred during Primarch gatherings began to include topics that Ferrus found deeply troubling, particularly debates about the nature of perfection and the methods that should be used to achieve it. Some of his brothers expressed interest in exploring alternatives to the Emperor's prescribed approaches to human enhancement and technological development, suggesting that there might be other sources of knowledge and power that could accelerate the Imperium's expansion across the galaxy. These conversations often touched on subjects that bordered on heretical thinking, questioning established doctrine in ways that seemed to undermine the systematic approach that had made the Great Crusade successful. The influence of the warrior lodges that had emerged within several legions represented exactly the kind of organizational development that Ferrus's analytical mind identified as potentially dangerous to proper military discipline. These informal gatherings created parallel command structures that operated outside official channels, allowing ideas and influences to spread through legion ranks without oversight from their primarchs or senior officers. The secretive nature of these organizations troubled Ferrus, as their hidden agendas and unofficial hierarchies introduced variables that could not be controlled or predicted using conventional military planning methods. Ferrus's attempts to discuss his concerns with other Primarchs met with responses that ranged from dismissive reassurance to outright hostility, depending on their own involvement in the developments he had identified as problematic. Brothers who had previously shared his commitment to systematic analysis and logical planning now seemed reluctant to engage in detailed discussions about potential threats to imperial unity, deflecting his questions with vague platitudes about trust and brotherhood that avoided addressing the specific issues he had raised. This resistance to systematic evaluation of emerging problems struck Ferrus as itself indicative of the kind of thinking that could lead to catastrophic failures in judgment. The growing tensions between different factions within the Primarch Brotherhood became apparent during strategic planning sessions for major compliance operations. Debates that had once focused on tactical efficiency and resource optimization increasingly devolved into arguments about fundamental principles and philosophical differences that had little relevance to immediate military objectives. Some Primarchs advocated for approaches that seemed to prioritize political considerations over military effectiveness, while others pushed for methods that appeared designed to test the limits of imperial doctrine rather than achieve compliance through proven techniques. Ferrus's unwavering loyalty to the Emperor and his systematic approach to evaluating information made him particularly sensitive to any suggestions that imperial doctrine might be flawed or incomplete. He had witnessed firsthand the effectiveness of the Emperor's vision during the unification of Medusa and the subsequent success of the Great Crusade, and he could identify no logical reason to question methods that had consistently produced successful outcomes. The systematic nature of imperial expansion, with its emphasis on technological superiority and disciplined military organization, aligned perfectly with his own understanding of how complex objectives could be achieved through methodical planning and superior capabilities. The Primarch's suspicion of those who questioned established doctrine stemmed from his recognition that successful military operations required absolute commitment to proven principles and systematic execution of established procedures. Commanders who allowed doubt or philosophical speculation to influence their tactical decisions introduced variables that could compromise mission effectiveness when facing determined opposition. The Great Crusade's success had been built on the foundation of unwavering commitment to imperial methods and the systematic application of superior technology and disciplined tactics against less organized opponents. The influence of chaos corruption on several Primarchs manifested in ways that were subtle enough to escape detection by less systematic observers, but which created patterns of behavior that Ferrus's analytical mind could not ignore. Brothers who had previously demonstrated logical thinking and methodical planning began making decisions that seemed to be influenced by considerations that had no apparent connection to tactical effectiveness or strategic objectives. Their equipment choices, tactical preferences, and even personal appearance began to incorporate elements that served no practical purpose while introducing aesthetic or symbolic features that seemed to reflect influences from outside imperial doctrine. The corruption's progression through affected legions followed patterns that became increasingly apparent to commanders who maintained systematic observation of their brother forces' development. Units that had previously operated according to established tactical doctrines began experimenting with approaches that emphasized individual prowess over collective effectiveness, while their equipment modifications focused on appearance and symbolic meaning rather than practical improvements to combat capability. These changes often occurred gradually enough that they appeared to be natural evolution of Legion culture, but their cumulative effect was to undermine the disciplined execution that had made the Great Crusade successful. Ferrus's failure to recognize the specific threat posed to Fulgrim represented one of the most tragic oversights of his otherwise systematic approach to threat assessment. The corruption that gradually consumed the Emperor's children Primarch operated through mechanisms that exploited his existing drive for perfection, transforming his pursuit of excellence into something that served malevolent purposes while maintaining the appearance of legitimate advancement. The changes in Fulgrim's behavior and priorities occurred slowly enough that they could be attributed to natural development of his philosophical positions rather than external influence, making them difficult to identify as symptoms of a more serious problem. The friendship between Ferrus and Fulgrim created emotional attachments that compromised the Primarch's normally objective evaluation of potential threats. His personal affection for his brother and his respect for the Emperor's children's achievements made him reluctant to subject Fulgrim's actions to the same systematic analysis that he applied to other potentially problematic developments within the Imperium. The trust that had developed between them through years of collaboration and friendly competition created blind spots in Ferrus's threat assessment that prevented him from recognizing the subtle signs of corruption that might have been apparent to a more detached observer. The gradual changes in Fulgrim's approach to warfare and legion management manifested as shifts in emphasis rather than dramatic departures from established doctrine, making them difficult to identify as symptoms of external influence. The Emperor's children's increasing focus on perfection in execution and aesthetic considerations could be rationalized as natural development of their existing cultural tendencies, while their growing interest in exotic weapons and equipment modifications seemed consistent with their pursuit of excellence in all aspects of military capability. These developments appeared to represent evolution rather than corruption, allowing the underlying threat to progress without triggering the systematic threat analysis that might have identified its true nature. The strategic positioning of the Iron Hands Legion as the heresy conspiracy unfolded reflected both the Primarch's systematic approach to military planning and his failure to recognize the scope of the threat that was developing within the Imperium. Ferrus continued to deploy his forces according to tactical doctrines that assumed loyalty and competence among his brother Primarchs, positioning the 10th Legion to support joint operations and provide technological expertise for complex compliance actions. This approach left his warriors distributed across multiple theaters of operation where they could contribute to ongoing campaigns, but were not concentrated in defensive positions that might have better prepared them for the betrayal that was approaching. The Legion's manufacturing capabilities and advanced augmentation technologies made them valuable assets for supporting other Imperial forces, leading to deployment patterns that emphasized their role as force multipliers rather than independent operational units. Ferrus's willingness to provide technical support and specialized equipment to brother legions reflected his commitment to Imperial unity and his belief that systematic cooperation would maximize the effectiveness of the Great Crusade. However, this approach also created dependencies and information-sharing arrangements that could be exploited by corrupted forces seeking to understand and counter the 10th Legion's technological advantages. The development of joint training exercises and equipment standardization programs between the Iron Hands and other legions created opportunities for potential enemies to study their capabilities and identify weaknesses that could be exploited during future conflicts. Ferrus's systematic approach to improving Imperial military effectiveness through shared knowledge and coordinated development inadvertently provided intelligence that would prove valuable to the traitor forces when open warfare began. The same methodical planning and technological innovation that made the 10th Legion so effective also made their capabilities predictable to opponents who had access to detailed information about their equipment and tactical doctrines. The intelligence networks that Ferrus had established to monitor potential threats and evaluate the effectiveness of Imperial military operations became sources of information that could be compromised by corrupted elements within other legions and Imperial organizations. His systematic approach to data collection and analysis required extensive communication with other Imperial forces, creating information flows that could be intercepted or manipulated by hostile agents seeking to understand and counter the 10th Legion's capabilities. The very thoroughness that made these intelligence systems effective also made them vulnerable to exploitation by enemies who understood their structure and operational methods. The positioning of Iron Hands forces during the critical period before the heresy's outbreak reflected Ferrus's continued belief in the loyalty and competence of his brother Primarchs, leading to deployment decisions that prioritized operational effectiveness over defensive security. The 10th Legion's units were scattered across multiple sectors where they could provide maximum support to ongoing compliance operations, but this distribution left them vulnerable to coordinated attacks that could exploit their dispersal and prevent effective mutual support between different formations. The systematic nature of their deployment made their positions predictable to enemies who had access to Imperial strategic planning documents and communication networks. The Legion's advanced manufacturing capabilities required significant logistical support and specialized facilities that could not be easily relocated or defended against determined attacks. The forge complexes and technical installations that enabled the 10th Legion's technological superiority represented high-value targets that enemies could prioritize for destruction or capture, potentially crippling the Legion's ability to maintain their equipment and develop new augmentation technologies. The concentration of these facilities in specific locations created vulnerabilities that systematic attackers could exploit to achieve strategic objectives that would have lasting impact on the Legion's operational effectiveness. The trust that Ferrus placed in established Imperial communication networks and command structures created additional vulnerabilities that corrupted forces could exploit to coordinate attacks against Iron Hand's positions. The systematic nature of Imperial military organization meant that operational orders and strategic intelligence flowed through predictable channels that could be monitored or manipulated by hostile agents with access to the appropriate systems. The 10th Legion's reliance on these networks for coordination with other Imperial forces made them dependent on communication systems that might be compromised by enemies seeking to isolate and destroy their scattered formations. The astropathic messages that reached Ferrus Manus aboard his flagship Fist of Iron carried information so devastating that even his methodical mind struggled to process the full implications of what had transpired on Istvan III. The initial reports spoke of virus bombing, of loyalist space marines murdered by their own brothers, of Horus Lupercal, the War Master himself, declaring open rebellion against the Emperor. The systematic nature of Ferrus's thinking demanded verification of these claims through multiple sources, but each subsequent transmission only confirmed the horrific reality that the Imperium faced its greatest crisis since the unification of Terra. The details that emerged from the massacre painted a picture of betrayal so comprehensive and methodical that it bore the hallmarks of planning that had extended far beyond the immediate tactical situation on Istvan III. The virus bombs deployed against Loyalist forces had been specifically designed to target space marine physiology, suggesting access to classified biological warfare research that should have been restricted to the highest levels of Imperial command. The coordination between different traitor elements indicated communication networks and command structures that had been operating in secret for an extended period, undermining the very foundations of Imperial military organization while maintaining the appearance of loyalty and cooperation. Ferrus's analysis of the available intelligence revealed patterns of deception and misdirection that explained many of the subtle inconsistencies he had observed in his brother Primarch's behavior during recent strategic planning sessions. The philosophical discussions that had seemed merely troubling now appeared as deliberate attempts to test the loyalty of different commanders and identify potential recruits for the rebellion. The equipment modifications and tactical innovations that had appeared to serve no practical purpose could now be understood as preparations for warfare against Imperial forces, designed to counter the standard doctrines and equipment that Loyalist commanders would employ. The Primarch's immediate response reflected the same systematic approach that characterized all of his military planning, but the urgency of the situation demanded accelerated decision-making processes that compressed normally thorough analysis into rapid tactical assessments. The Iron Hands Legion needed to be consolidated from their scattered positions across multiple sectors, their manufacturing capabilities redirected toward producing equipment specifically designed for warfare against traitor space marines, and their augmented warriors prepared for combat against opponents who possessed intimate knowledge of Imperial tactics and technology. The recall orders transmitted to Iron Hands formations throughout the galaxy carried authentication codes that would prevent interception or falsification by hostile forces, while their content emphasized the need for immediate compliance without detailed explanations that might compromise operational security. Company commanders received instructions to abandon ongoing operations and consolidate at predetermined rally points, bringing with them all available manufacturing equipment and technical specialists who could contribute to the Legion's preparation for the coming conflict. The systematic nature of these orders reflected Ferrus's understanding that effective response to the crisis required rapid concentration of force and resources. The intelligence gathered from Iron Hands units that had been operating in proximity to suspected traitor forces provided crucial information about the scope and organization of the rebellion. Space Marines who had participated in joint training exercises with the Sons of Horus, Emperor's Children, Death Guard, and World Eaters reported equipment modifications and tactical innovations that had seemed puzzling at the time, but could now be understood as preparations for warfare against loyalist forces. The systematic collection and analysis of this intelligence revealed the extent to which the traitor legions had been preparing for their rebellion, while maintaining the appearance of continued loyalty to Imperial doctrine. Ferrus's determination to personally confront the traitors emerged from both his tactical assessment of the situation and his emotional response to the betrayal of everything he had fought to achieve during the Great Crusade. The systematic expansion of human civilization across the galaxy represented the culmination of the Emperor's vision for humanity's future, and the rebellion threatened to destroy everything that had been accomplished through decades of disciplined military action and technological innovation. The Primarch viewed the traitors' actions as not merely military rebellion, but as a fundamental rejection of the logical principles that had made Imperial success possible. The personal dimension of the betrayal struck Ferrus with particular force when he considered the implications of Fulgrim's involvement in the rebellion. The friendship that had developed between them through years of collaboration and competition had created bonds that transcended simple military cooperation, making the Emperor's Children Primarch's treachery feel like a violation of trust that went beyond tactical or strategic considerations. The weapons they had crafted for each other, the challenges they had shared, and the mutual respect they had developed now appeared as tools that had been used to deceive him and gather intelligence about his capabilities and weaknesses. The coordination with fellow loyalist Primarchs Vulcan and Corax began with encrypted communications that established secure channels for planning the response to the traitor rebellion. The three Primarchs shared similar approaches to systematic military planning and technological innovation, making them natural allies for operations that would require careful coordination and disciplined execution. Their legions possessed complementary capabilities that could be integrated to create combined forces capable of matching the technological advantages that the traitors had gained through their preparation and coordination. Vulcan's expertise in advanced metallurgy and weapons technology provided capabilities that could enhance the Iron Hand's already formidable manufacturing systems, while Corax's mastery of stealth tactics and rapid deployment offered strategic options that could compensate for the numerical disadvantages that loyalist forces might face in the initial phases of the conflict. The combination of these different specializations created opportunities for tactical innovations that none of the legions could have achieved independently, while their shared commitment to systematic planning ensured that joint operations would be executed with the precision and coordination necessary for success against prepared opponents. The strategic planning sessions that followed the initial coordination between the three Primarchs revealed the scope of the challenge that loyalist forces would face in confronting the rebellion. The traitors had gained significant advantages through their preparation and coordination, including access to advanced weaponry, modified tactical doctrines, and intelligence about loyalist capabilities that could be used to counter standard Imperial military approaches. The systematic nature of their rebellion suggested planning that had extended over months or years, creating organizational structures and resource allocation systems that would be difficult to disrupt through conventional military action. Ferrus's contribution to the joint planning process focused on the technological aspects of the coming conflict and the manufacturing capabilities that would be needed to sustain extended military operations against well-equipped opponents. The Iron Hand's portable forge complexes could produce specialized equipment designed specifically for warfare against traitor space marines, while their augmented warriors could serve as test subjects for new augmentation technologies that might provide tactical advantages in the unique conditions of civil war. The systematic approach that had made the 10th Legion so effective during the Great Crusade would be adapted to meet the specific challenges of fighting opponents who possessed detailed knowledge of Imperial capabilities. The intelligence sharing between the three Loyalist legions created a comprehensive picture of traitor capabilities and intentions that informed their tactical planning and resource allocation decisions. Reports from Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard units that had encountered traitor forces provided detailed information about equipment modifications, tactical innovations, and command structures that the rebels had developed in preparation for their rebellion. The systematic analysis of this intelligence revealed patterns and vulnerabilities that could be exploited through coordinated action by forces that understood the traitors' methods and limitations. The preparation of the Iron Hands Legion for what they believed would be swift retribution against the rebels reflected Ferrus's confidence in the superiority of systematic planning and technological advancement over the chaotic methods that characterized rebellious forces. The Primarch's analysis of historical precedents suggested that military rebellions typically failed when confronted by disciplined forces that possessed superior equipment and systematic tactical doctrines. The traitors' initial success on Istvan III could be attributed to surprise and the specific advantages of chemical warfare, but extended conflict would favor forces that could maintain their equipment, coordinate their operations, and adapt their tactics according to logical analysis of battlefield conditions. The modifications made to Iron Hands equipment and augmentation systems during this preparation period focused on capabilities that would be specifically useful in warfare against other space marines. Standard bolter ammunition was supplemented with specialized rounds designed to penetrate traitor armor modifications, while power armor systems received enhancements that would provide protection against the exotic weapons that intelligence reports suggested the rebels had developed. The systematic approach to these modifications ensured that each enhancement served a specific tactical purpose while maintaining compatibility with existing equipment and training doctrines. The augmented warriors of the 10th Legion underwent additional modifications designed to provide advantages in the close quarters combat that was expected to characterize much of the fighting against traitor forces. Cybernetic enhancements to sensory systems would allow them to detect the subtle signs of chaos corruption that might not be apparent to unaugmented observers, while modifications to their neural interfaces would provide resistance to the psychological warfare techniques that intelligence reports suggested the traitors were employing. The integration of these new systems with existing augmentations required careful calibration to ensure that enhanced capabilities did not compromise the systematic thinking and disciplined execution that made Iron Hands warriors so effective. The manufacturing priorities established during this preparation period reflected Ferrus's understanding that extended conflict would require sustained production of specialized equipment and replacement components for damaged systems. The Legion's forge complexes were reconfigured to produce ammunition types and equipment modifications that had been specifically designed for warfare against traitor space marines, while their technical specialists developed new manufacturing techniques that could maintain production rates even under combat conditions. The systematic approach to industrial planning ensured that Iron Hands forces would be able to maintain their technological advantages throughout extended campaigns. The coordination of supply lines and logistical support between the three loyalist legions created integrated systems that could sustain joint operations across multiple theaters of conflict. The Iron Hand's manufacturing capabilities would provide specialized equipment for all three forces, while the Salamander's expertise in heavy weapons and fortification would support defensive operations, and the Raven Guard's rapid deployment capabilities would enable strategic mobility that could counter the traitors' coordination advantages. The systematic integration of these different capabilities created combined forces that possessed greater flexibility and effectiveness than any individual legion could achieve. The intelligence networks established to monitor traitor movements and identify potential targets for the punitive expedition incorporated security measures designed to prevent the kind of infiltration and deception that had enabled the initial rebellion. Communication protocols required multiple authentication stages and verification through independent sources, while operational planning was compartmentalized to limit the information available to any individual who might be compromised by enemy action. The systematic approach to intelligence security reflected lessons learned from the traitors' success in maintaining their conspiracy while operating within Imperial command structures. The tactical doctrines developed for the coming conflict emphasized the systematic elimination of traitor advantages through superior technology and disciplined execution, rather than attempting to match the rebels' apparent willingness to employ unconventional methods and forbidden technologies. Ferrus believed that the traitors' embrace of chaotic approaches to warfare would ultimately prove to be a weakness that could be exploited by forces that maintained systematic thinking and logical tactical planning. The disciplined application of superior capabilities would eventually overcome the temporary advantages that the rebels had gained through surprise and preparation. The deployment to Istvan V represented what Ferrus Manus believed would be the decisive moment in crushing the rebellion that threatened to tear apart everything the Great Crusade had achieved. The combined Loyalist force assembled for this operation included 7 full Space Marine legions, a concentration of military power that should have been sufficient to annihilate any opposition the traitors could muster. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard would form the first wave of the assault, striking directly at the fortified positions that Horus had established on the planet's surface. The second wave, consisting of the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers, would provide reinforcement and prevent any possibility of traitor escape from the killing ground that Istvan V was intended to become. The intelligence reports that reached the Loyalist commanders painted a picture of extensive fortifications that the Sons of Horus and their allies had constructed across the planet's primary landmass. Defensive positions incorporated both conventional bunker systems and more exotic technologies that suggested the traitors had gained access to advanced weaponry during their rebellion. Orbital reconnaissance revealed networks of interconnected strongpoints that could provide mutual fire support, while underground tunnel systems allowed for rapid redeployment of forces between different defensive sectors. The systematic nature of these preparations indicated that the traitors had been planning for exactly this kind of confrontation, using their time since Istvan III to create killing fields designed to maximize casualties among attacking forces. Ferrus's analysis of the defensive arrangements revealed both strengths and vulnerabilities that could be exploited through proper application of the Loyalists' technological advantages. The traitor fortifications appeared designed primarily to counter conventional assault tactics, with overlapping fields of fire that would devastate infantry formations attempting direct approaches to their positions. However, the fixed nature of these defenses created opportunities for systematic destruction through concentrated firepower and coordinated attacks that could overwhelm specific sectors while preventing effective mutual support between different defensive positions. The Primarch's tactical planning emphasized the use of overwhelming force applied at carefully selected points, rather than attempting to assault the entire defensive perimeter simultaneously. The Iron Hands augmented warriors would spearhead breakthrough operations at locations where the traitor defenses showed signs of weakness or incomplete preparation, while their advanced manufacturing capabilities would provide specialized equipment designed specifically for siege warfare against space marine opponents. The systematic reduction of enemy strongpoints would create gaps in their defensive network that could be exploited by follow-up forces to achieve complete penetration of their positions. The coordination between the three first-wave legions reflected the systematic approach that all three Primarchs brought to military planning, with each force assigned specific objectives that played to their individual strengths while contributing to the overall tactical plan. Vulcan's salamanders would provide heavy weapons support and siege equipment that could breach the most heavily fortified positions, while Corax's Raven Guard would exploit their mobility and stealth capabilities to identify weaknesses in the traitor defenses and coordinate flanking maneuvers that could disrupt enemy command and control systems. The Iron Hands would serve as the primary assault force, their augmented warriors and advanced equipment providing the striking power needed to break through prepared positions. The drop pod assault that initiated the battle represented one of the largest single deployment operations in the history of the Space Marine Legions, with thousands of armored capsules descending through Istvan V's atmosphere in carefully coordinated waves designed to overwhelm the traitor's anti-aircraft defenses. The Iron Hands contingent included specialized assault pods equipped with enhanced armor plating and penetration systems that could survive impacts with fortified positions, allowing their occupants to begin combat operations immediately upon landing rather than requiring time to exit their transport vehicles and organize for attack. Ferrus himself descended in a command pod that had been modified with additional communication systems and tactical displays that would allow him to coordinate the assault while participating directly in the fighting. The Primarch's necrodermis hands interfaced directly with the pod's control systems during descent, providing him with real-time data about landing conditions and enemy defensive responses that enabled precise targeting of his insertion point. The living metal appendages could feel the stress patterns in the pod's hull as it penetrated the atmosphere and absorbed defensive fire, automatically adjusting internal systems to compensate for damage and ensure successful deployment. The initial moments of the assault proceeded according to plan, with Loyalist forces achieving successful landings across multiple sectors of the traitor defensive perimeter. The Iron Hands augmented warriors emerged from their drop pods already firing, their enhanced sensory systems allowing them to identify and engage targets within seconds of landing, while their cybernetic modifications provided protection against the disorienting effects of combat deployment. The systematic nature of their assault tactics created immediate pressure on traitor positions, forcing defenders to respond to coordinated attacks rather than implementing their own tactical plans. The traitor resistance proved more sophisticated and better coordinated than intelligence reports had suggested, with defensive positions that incorporated technologies and tactics that exceeded what should have been available to rebellious forces operating independently of Imperial supply networks. Enemy weapons demonstrated penetrating power that could defeat standard Space Marine armor with disturbing ease, while their communication systems maintained coordination between different defensive sectors, despite the systematic jamming efforts that Loyalist forces had implemented. The effectiveness of traitor countermeasures suggested access to advanced military technologies and tactical intelligence that should have been restricted to the highest levels of Imperial command. Ferrus led his warriors in a direct assault against the strongest concentration of enemy fortifications, his necrodermis hands tearing apart defensive barriers that had been designed to withstand conventional weapons, while Forgebreaker demolished bunker systems, with impacts that shattered reinforced ceramite and twisted metal support structures. The Primarch's personal intervention created breaches in the traitor defensive line that his Space Marines could exploit, their augmented capabilities allowing them to maintain the aggressive tempo needed to prevent enemy forces from reorganizing their positions or implementing fallback plans. The systematic advance of Iron Hands formations across the battlefield demonstrated the effectiveness of their technological advantages when applied with proper tactical coordination. Squads of augmented warriors moved with mechanical precision through enemy defensive positions, their enhanced sensory systems identifying targets and threats, while their cybernetic modifications provided protection against the exotic weapons that traitor forces deployed against them. The integration of individual capabilities with unit-level coordination created a form of warfare that resembled the operation of a vast machine, with each component contributing to the systematic destruction of enemy resistance. The apparent success of the initial assault began to reveal itself as part of a larger deception when the second wave of Loyalist reinforcements commenced their own drop pod deployment. The Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers descended toward landing zones that had been cleared by the first wave's advance, their arrival timed to coincide with the moment when traitor resistance should have been collapsing under the pressure of sustained assault. However, instead of providing reinforcement for the ongoing attack, these forces immediately opened fire on the Loyalist legions that had fought to secure their landing sites. The betrayal struck with devastating effectiveness precisely because it exploited the systematic trust and coordination that characterized Loyalist military operations. Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard formations had positioned themselves according to tactical doctrines that assumed mutual support from allied forces, creating defensive vulnerabilities that could be exploited by attackers who possessed detailed knowledge of their deployment patterns and communication procedures. The second wave's intimate familiarity with Loyalist capabilities allowed them to target specific weaknesses while coordinating their attacks with the supposedly defeated traitor forces that had been fighting from the fortified positions. The realization that 7 Space Marine legions had turned traitor rather than the 4 originally identified transformed the tactical situation from a punitive expedition against isolated rebels into a desperate struggle for survival against overwhelming odds. The systematic approach that had served Ferrus so well during the Great Crusade now worked against him, as his methodical tactical planning had not accounted for the possibility of such comprehensive betrayal among his brother Primarchs. The logical analysis that guided his decision-making processes struggled to adapt to conditions where established assumptions about loyalty and cooperation no longer applied. The Iron Hands found themselves caught between the original traitor fortifications and the newly revealed enemy forces that had landed behind their positions, creating a tactical situation that conventional military doctrine had never been designed to address. The systematic coordination that had made their initial assault so effective now became a liability, as enemy forces could predict their likely responses and position themselves to counter Loyalist attempts at reorganization or withdrawal. The advanced communication systems that had enabled precise coordination between different Iron Hands formations now carried orders and tactical updates that might be compromised by traitor intelligence networks. Ferrus's immediate response to the betrayal reflected both his tactical expertise and his emotional reaction to the scope of the deception that had been perpetrated against the Loyalist forces. The Primarch's analytical mind recognized that conventional withdrawal procedures would be impossible under the current conditions, while his personal sense of betrayal demanded direct confrontation with the brother who had orchestrated this elaborate trap. The systematic thinking that normally guided his tactical decisions became secondary to the overwhelming need to confront Fulgrim and demand an explanation for the destruction of everything their friendship had represented. The fighting that erupted across the drop site created scenes of unprecedented carnage as Space Marine fought Space Marine with weapons and tactics that had been designed for use against alien enemies and rebellious human populations. The traitor forces possessed detailed intelligence about Loyalist equipment and capabilities, allowing them to deploy countermeasures and specialized ammunition that could penetrate armor systems and neutralize augmentations that should have provided significant tactical advantages. The systematic slaughter that followed demonstrated the effectiveness of preparation and coordination when applied against opponents who had not anticipated such comprehensive betrayal. The Iron Hands augmented warriors found that their cybernetic modifications, which had provided such advantages during the Great Crusade, now made them priority targets for traitor forces that understood exactly how to disable or destroy their enhanced capabilities. Enemy weapons included electromagnetic pulse devices that could disrupt neural interfaces, while specialized ammunition could shatter mechanical limbs and damage internal augmentation systems in ways that would incapacitate even superhuman warriors. The systematic targeting of their technological advantages revealed the extent to which the traitors had prepared for exactly this kind of confrontation. The collapse of coordinated resistance among the loyalist forces occurred with terrifying speed as the scope of the betrayal became apparent to individual units across the battlefield. Space Marines who had fought alongside the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word Bearers during previous campaigns found themselves under attack by warriors they had considered brothers, while the communication networks that should have enabled effective coordination carried conflicting orders and tactical updates that suggested widespread command structure failure. The systematic destruction of loyalist capabilities proceeded according to plans that had clearly been developed over an extended period. Ferrus's desperate search for Fulgrim across the chaos of the battlefield reflected both his tactical understanding that eliminating enemy leadership could disrupt their coordination and his personal need to confront the brother whose betrayal had made this massacre possible. The Primarch's necrodermis hands crushed traitor weapons and armor as he carved a path through enemy formations, his enhanced capabilities allowing him to maintain forward momentum despite the overwhelming numerical disadvantages that loyalist forces faced. The systematic destruction that surrounded him provided constant reminders of the cost of the trust he had placed in his corrupted brothers. The meeting between Ferrus and Fulgrim occurred amid the wreckage of loyalist hopes and the systematic slaughter of warriors who had served the Emperor with unwavering dedication throughout the Great Crusade. The two Primarchs faced each other across a battlefield, littered with the bodies of Space Marines from multiple legions, their confrontation representing not merely a tactical engagement between opposing commanders, but the final dissolution of bonds that had transcended simple military cooperation. The weapons they had crafted for each other now served as instruments for a duel that would determine not only their individual fates, but the broader outcome of the massacre that continued around them. The severing of Ferrus Manus's head by Fulgrim's blade sent shockwaves through the iron hands that transcended mere tactical disaster. The sight of their Primarch's lifeless form, his necrodermis hands still gleaming silver in the smoke-choked air of Istvan V, shattered something fundamental in the psyche of every surviving Iron Hands warrior who witnessed it. The systematic worldview that Ferrus had instilled in his legion, the belief that proper preparation, technological superiority, and methodical execution could overcome any challenge, crumbled in the face of this ultimate failure. The Gorgon who had taught them that flesh was weak and could be perfected through augmentation had proven mortal after all. The immediate aftermath saw Iron Hands formations across the drop site begin to fragment as the psychological impact of their Primarch's death combined with the tactical chaos of the ongoing massacre. Squad leaders found themselves making desperate decisions without the systematic command structure that had defined their legion's operations since its founding. Veterans who had served for decades under Ferrus's methodical guidance discovered that their training had not prepared them for a scenario where their fundamental beliefs about strength and superiority had been so brutally disproven. The necrodermis hands that many warriors bore as marks of honor now seemed like mockeries of their fallen Gene father's legacy. Captain Gabriel Santer of the 1st Company witnessed his Primarch's death from a position barely 300 meters away, his augmented visual systems recording every detail of the duel's conclusion with mechanical precision. The veteran warrior had fought alongside Ferrus for over 2 centuries, his own extensive cybernetic modifications serving as testament to his dedication to the Primarch's teachings about the weakness of flesh. The sight of those legendary silver hands falling still triggered a cascade failure in Santer's neural implants, the machine spirits that inhabited his augmentations seeming to recoil from the impossibility of what they were processing. The surviving Iron Hands scattered across Istvan V faced a tactical situation that defied every doctrine their Primarch had taught them. Surrounded by traitor forces that outnumbered them 7-1, cut off from orbital support, and operating without centralized command, they found themselves forced to abandon the systematic approaches that had defined their military culture. Small groups of survivors began forming ad hoc units based on proximity rather than established command hierarchies, their actions driven by immediate survival needs rather than strategic objectives. The methodical precision that had characterized Iron Hands' operations gave way to desperate improvisation as warriors struggled to adapt to circumstances their training had never envisioned. The evacuation efforts that followed the massacre's immediate conclusion revealed the extent to which the Iron Hands had been psychologically as well as tactically devastated by their losses. Surviving Techmarines found their usually reliable machine spirits behaving erratically, as if the artificial intelligences that inhabited their equipment were themselves traumatized by the systematic destruction they had witnessed. Power armor systems that had functioned flawlessly for decades began experiencing cascade failures, while weapons that had never malfunctioned started jamming at critical moments. The integration of flesh and machine that had been the Legion's greatest strength now seemed to amplify their psychological wounds through technological manifestations. The survivors who managed to escape Istvan V carried with them not only physical wounds, but a fundamental crisis of faith that would reshape their understanding of warfare and their place within the Imperium. The systematic approach to combat that Ferrus had instilled in them had been based on the premise that superior technology and methodical planning could overcome any opponent, but the massacre had demonstrated that these advantages meant nothing when facing enemies who possessed intimate knowledge of their capabilities and limitations. The betrayal by their brother legions had revealed vulnerabilities in their worldview that went far beyond tactical considerations. Iron Father Cardan Stronos, one of the few senior officers to survive the initial betrayal, found himself leading a mixed group of survivors from multiple companies as they fought their way toward extraction points that might not even exist. His own augmentations, which included a sophisticated tactical analysis system that had served him well during countless Great Crusade battles, now provided only grim assessments of their chances for survival. The machine spirit that inhabited his neural implants seemed to struggle with processing the tactical data from Istvan V, its logical algorithms unable to account for the variables introduced by such comprehensive betrayal. The formation of what would become known as the Shattered Legions began during those desperate hours following the massacre, as survivors from the Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard found themselves thrown together by circumstances rather than strategic planning. The traditional boundaries between legions became meaningless when facing annihilation, and warriors who had previously operated according to distinct doctrinal approaches were forced to adapt and integrate their capabilities in ways that had never been attempted before. Iron Hands veterans with their technological expertise found themselves working alongside Salamander artificers and Raven Guard stealth specialists, creating hybrid tactical approaches that drew from multiple military traditions. The psychological impact of serving alongside warriors from other legions proved both challenging and therapeutic for the surviving Iron Hands. Their systematic approach to warfare had always emphasized the superiority of their own methods and technologies, but the shared trauma of Istvan V created bonds that transcended doctrinal differences. Salamanders who had witnessed their own Primarch's apparent death understood the grief that consumed the Iron Hands, while Raven Guard survivors shared their expertise in covert operations that could enable effective resistance against overwhelming enemy forces. The integration of different Legion cultures began to create new tactical possibilities that none of them could have achieved independently. The guerrilla warfare that characterized the Shattered Legion's operations throughout the remainder of the Horus Heresy represented a fundamental departure from the systematic approaches that had defined Iron Hand's military doctrine. Instead of the methodical application of overwhelming force that Ferrus had favored, his surviving sons were forced to adopt hit-and-run tactics that emphasized mobility, stealth, and the careful selection of targets that could be eliminated without triggering massive retaliation. The technological advantages that had once enabled direct confrontation with any enemy now had to be employed with subtlety and precision to avoid detection by traitor forces. The modification of Iron Hand's equipment for covert operations required innovations that challenged many of the assumptions that had guided their previous technological development. Power armor systems that had been designed for maximum protection and intimidation factor were stripped down and reconfigured for stealth operations, while weapons that had prioritized raw firepower were replaced with specialized tools designed for sabotage and assassination. The systematic approach that had characterized their manufacturing processes was adapted to support small-scale production of specialized equipment that could be fabricated using portable forge units hidden in asteroid bases and derelict ships. The psychological adaptation required for this new form of warfare proved particularly difficult for Iron Hand's veterans, whose entire military identity had been built around concepts of technological superiority and methodical execution. Warriors who had spent decades perfecting systematic assault tactics found themselves learning stealth techniques from Raven Guard instructors, while tech marines who had focused on maintaining heavy equipment were forced to develop expertise in sabotage and improvised explosives. The integration of these new capabilities with their existing augmentations created hybrid skill sets that would have been impossible under normal circumstances. The leadership structure that emerged within the Shattered Legions reflected the necessities of guerrilla warfare rather than the formal hierarchies that had characterized Legion organization during the Great Crusade. Iron Hand's officers found themselves commanding mixed units that included warriors from multiple legions, requiring them to develop new approaches to tactical coordination that could accommodate different training backgrounds and equipment types. The systematic command protocols that Ferrus had established were gradually replaced by more flexible arrangements that emphasized individual initiative and adaptive planning rather than centralized control. The autonomous company structure that would later define the Iron Hands chapter began to develop during this period of guerrilla operations, as surviving units were forced to operate independently for extended periods without support or communication from higher command levels. Each company became a self-contained military organization capable of manufacturing its own equipment, conducting its own intelligence operations, and planning its own missions according to local conditions and available targets. The systematic coordination that had once characterized Legion-wide operations gave way to parallel efforts that shared common objectives but operated according to different tactical approaches. The technological innovations that emerged from this period of independent operation demonstrated the adaptability of Iron Hand's technical expertise when freed from the systematic constraints that had previously governed their development processes. Small units working with limited resources developed new augmentation techniques that could be implemented using portable surgical equipment, while tech marines created weapon modifications that enhanced effectiveness against traitor space marine armor without requiring access to full manufacturing facilities. The systematic approach to innovation was replaced by pragmatic experimentation that prioritized immediate tactical advantages over long-term doctrinal consistency. The intelligence networks that supported Shattered Legion operations represented a significant departure from the formal communication systems that had characterized Imperial military organization during the Great Crusade. Iron Hands units established contact with loyalist elements throughout the galaxy using encrypted channels that bypassed official Imperial communication networks, creating parallel information systems that could operate without detection by traitor forces. The systematic approach to intelligence gathering was adapted to support covert operations that required detailed knowledge of enemy positions and capabilities, while maintaining operational security that could prevent discovery and retaliation. The recruitment practices that sustained Iron Hands units during this period reflected the desperate circumstances that faced all loyalist forces following the massacre at Istvan V. Traditional selection criteria that had emphasized specific physical and psychological characteristics were relaxed to accommodate volunteers from other military organizations who possessed the technical skills and dedication necessary to support guerrilla operations. The systematic training programs that had produced Iron Hand Space Marines were compressed and modified to create accelerated indoctrination processes that could prepare new recruits for immediate deployment in combat operations. The modification of Medusan clan traditions to support distributed operations created cultural innovations that would survive long after the heresy's conclusion. The clan company structure that Ferrus had established was adapted to function independently across vast distances, with each unit maintaining its own traditions and specializations while contributing to broader strategic objectives. The systematic coordination that had once unified these different elements was replaced by shared cultural values and common tactical doctrines that could guide independent operations without requiring direct communication or centralized planning. The forged ships that supported Iron Hand's operations during this period represented mobile manufacturing capabilities that could sustain guerrilla forces without relying on fixed installations that might be discovered and destroyed by enemy forces. These vessels incorporated advanced fabrication systems that could produce everything from individual weapons to complete suits of power armor using raw materials obtained through salvage operations or covert mining activities. The systematic approach to industrial planning was adapted to support nomadic operations that required constant mobility while maintaining the technological advantages that remained central to Iron Hand's military effectiveness. The evolution of Iron Hand's tactical doctrine during the Shattered Legion period created hybrid approaches that combined their traditional emphasis on technological superiority with new capabilities derived from their cooperation with salamanders and Raven Guard survivors. The systematic assault tactics that had characterized their previous operations were supplemented with stealth techniques, sabotage methods, and psychological warfare capabilities that could multiply the effectiveness of small units operating behind enemy lines. The integration of these different approaches created tactical flexibility that would prove crucial for survival in the chaotic conditions that characterized the later stages of the Horus Heresy. The establishment of the Iron Council as the governing body of the Iron Hands chapter reflected their fundamental rejection of the single point of failure leadership model that had contributed to their near destruction. The death of Ferrus Manus had demonstrated that even the most powerful individual could be eliminated, leaving their followers leaderless and vulnerable. The Iron Council distributed authority among the chapter's senior officers, creating a command structure that could continue functioning even if multiple leaders were killed or incapacitated. Each Iron Father who sat on the council brought expertise in different aspects of warfare and technology, their collective knowledge replacing the singular genius that had once guided the Legion. The rotation of leadership responsibilities within the Iron Council ensured that no individual could accumulate the kind of personal authority that might lead to the corruption or compromise that had destroyed so many of their brother legions. Command positions changed according to systematic schedules that prevented the formation of permanent power structures, while major decisions required consensus among multiple council members rather than the decree of a single leader. This approach eliminated the charismatic leadership that had characterized many Primarchs while maintaining the systematic coordination that remained essential for effective military operations. The Iron Hand successors inherited this distributed command philosophy along with their gene seed, creating a network of chapters that operated according to similar principles while maintaining their independence from centralized authority. The Red Talons, Brazen Claws, and Iron Lords each developed their own interpretations of the Iron Council model, adapting the basic structure to their specific operational requirements and recruitment practices. The systematic exchange of personnel and information between these chapters created informal coordination networks that enabled joint operations, without requiring formal command hierarchies that might be vulnerable to infiltration or corruption. The obsession with purging weakness that had begun as Ferrus Manus's philosophical position evolved into something far more extreme among his surviving sons and their successors. The trauma of witnessing their Primarch's death had convinced many Iron Hands that his teachings about the weakness of flesh had not gone far enough. If even a Primarch could fall to treachery and violence, then clearly the integration of mechanical components needed to be pursued with greater dedication and systematic thoroughness. The cybernetic modifications that had once been viewed as improvements became seen as necessities for survival in a galaxy where betrayal could come from any source. The flesh is weak doctrine, transformed from a philosophical principle into a driving compulsion that influenced every aspect of chapter operations. New recruits underwent augmentation procedures that exceeded the standard Space Marine enhancement process, receiving cybernetic replacements for organic systems that were deemed unreliable or inefficient. Veterans who had served for decades found themselves under constant pressure to accept additional modifications that would eliminate the remaining biological components of their bodies. The systematic replacement of flesh with mechanical alternatives became a measure of dedication to the chapter's values and a prerequisite for advancement within its hierarchy. The extreme lengths to which some Iron Hands pursued cybernetic enhancement created warriors who bore little resemblance to their original human forms. Battle brothers whose bodies consisted primarily of mechanical components moved with the precise coordination of industrial machinery, their responses to tactical situations governed by logical analysis rather than emotional reactions. The integration of advanced targeting systems with their visual cortex allowed for supernatural accuracy with ranged weapons, while reinforced skeletal structures enabled them to carry equipment loads that would have crushed unmodified Space Marines. The chapter's successors developed their own variations on this theme of technological augmentation, each exploring different aspects of the integration between flesh and machine. The Red Talons specialized in combat modifications that enhanced their effectiveness in close-quarters fighting, their mechanical limbs incorporating retractable weapons and reinforced striking surfaces that could penetrate the heaviest armor. The Brazen Claws focused on sensory enhancements that provided unprecedented situational awareness, their augmented warriors capable of processing battlefield data with the efficiency of tactical cogitators, while maintaining the flexibility and initiative that purely mechanical systems lacked. The Iron Lords pursued the most extreme interpretation of their Primarch's teachings, systematically replacing organic components with mechanical alternatives until their warriors resembled walking vehicles more than enhanced humans. These heavily modified battle brothers served as living weapons platforms, their bodies incorporating multiple weapon systems and defensive measures that enabled them to function as individual units of devastating firepower. The psychological cost of such extensive modification was significant, with many veterans losing the capacity for emotional responses that had once defined their humanity. The manufacturing capabilities that had made the Iron Hands so effective during the Great Crusade evolved into something approaching an industrial religion among their successors. Chapter forges became centers of technological worship, where the creation of new augmentations and weapons took on ritualistic significance that went far beyond practical necessity. Tech Marines served dual roles as both engineers and priests, their understanding of machine spirits elevated to theological doctrine that governed every aspect of chapter operations. The systematic production of cybernetic components became a form of devotion that demonstrated proper reverence for the mechanical perfection that Ferrus Manus had embodied. The recruitment practices employed by Iron Hand's successors reflected their belief that only candidates who demonstrated proper understanding of flesh's inherent weakness deserved consideration for enhancement. Potential recruits underwent trials that systematically tested their willingness to accept cybernetic modification, with those who showed reluctance or attachment to their organic forms rejected regardless of their other qualifications. The selection process favored individuals who had already experienced significant injury or disfigurement, as these candidates had already learned the limitations of unaugmented biology through personal experience. The training doctrines that shaped new battle brothers emphasized the systematic suppression of emotional responses and the cultivation of logical thinking that could guide tactical decisions without the interference of human weakness. Neophytes learned to view pain, fear, and doubt as system errors that could be corrected through proper mental discipline and technological augmentation. The integration of cybernetic components with their enhanced physiology was presented as a graduation from the limitations that had caused their Primarch's death, each modification bringing them closer to the mechanical perfection that represented true strength. The relationship between Iron Hand's successors and the Adeptus Mechanicus deepened beyond the alliance that had characterized their Primarch's era, evolving into something approaching theological unity. Tech priests found in these chapters kindred spirits who shared their fundamental beliefs about the superiority of mechanical systems over organic alternatives. The exchange of knowledge and technology between the two organizations created innovations that benefited both, with Space Marine physiology providing test platforms for experimental augmentation technologies, while Mechanicus expertise enabled modifications that would have been impossible using conventional medical techniques. The forge worlds that supported Iron Hand's operations became pilgrimage destinations where battle brothers could receive the most advanced augmentations available within the Imperium. These facilities incorporated manufacturing capabilities that rivaled the greatest industrial complexes, their production lines capable of creating cybernetic components that were specifically tailored to individual warriors' requirements and tactical roles. The systematic approach to augmentation that characterized these operations ensured that each modification served specific purposes while maintaining compatibility with existing systems and chapter doctrine. The combat doctrine that emerged from this technological obsession emphasized the systematic application of overwhelming firepower and the methodical elimination of enemy capabilities through superior equipment and coordination. Iron Hand's forces approached warfare as an engineering problem that could be solved through proper analysis and the deployment of appropriate technological solutions. Their battle brothers moved across battlefields with mechanical precision, their augmented senses providing tactical data that enabled coordinated responses to threats and opportunities that unmodified warriors might miss. The psychological warfare capabilities that resulted from their extensive modifications created additional tactical advantages that supplemented their technological superiority. Enemy forces that witnessed Iron Hands in combat often experienced breakdowns in morale when confronted by warriors who seemed more machine than human, their mechanical limbs and augmented voices creating an aura of inhuman menace that could shatter enemy resolve before physical combat began. The systematic nature of their advance and the precise coordination of their attacks conveyed the impression of unstoppable mechanical forces rather than individual warriors who might be defeated through conventional means. The influence of Ferrus Manus's teachings extended far beyond his direct successors to shape imperial doctrine regarding technology and human enhancement throughout the 41st millennium. The concept that flesh represents inherent weakness, while mechanical augmentation provides strength, became embedded in imperial military thinking, influencing everything from the design of equipment to the selection criteria for specialized units. The systematic approach to warfare that he had championed became standard doctrine for imperial forces facing technologically sophisticated opponents, with his tactical innovations being studied and implemented across multiple military organizations. The rejection of human frailty that characterized Ferrus Manus's philosophy found expression in imperial policies that prioritized technological solutions over human considerations when addressing military challenges. The development of servo skulls, combat servitors, and automated defense systems reflected his belief that mechanical systems could provide more reliable performance than organic alternatives. The systematic replacement of human personnel with technological substitutes in high-risk roles demonstrated the lasting impact of his teachings on imperial strategic thinking. The Adeptus Mechanicus adopted many aspects of Iron Hand's doctrine as theological principles that guided their own development and expansion throughout the galaxy. The concept of mechanical perfection as a spiritual goal became central to their beliefs about the Omnissiah's will, while the systematic pursuit of technological advancement was elevated to religious duty that justified any sacrifice or modification necessary to achieve greater understanding. The integration of flesh and machine that Ferrus Manus had embodied became a model for the kind of transformation that tech priests sought to achieve through their own augmentation procedures. The legacy of the Gorgon continues to shape the Imperium's approach to warfare and technology in the 41st millennium, his systematic methods and technological innovations providing templates for addressing the countless threats that face humanity across the galaxy. The Iron Council's distributed leadership model has been adopted by other military organizations that recognize the vulnerabilities inherent in centralized command structures, while the chapter's manufacturing capabilities continue to produce equipment and augmentations that enhance imperial military effectiveness. The rejection of weakness that defined Ferrus Manus's philosophy remains a driving force in imperial doctrine, inspiring countless warriors to pursue the mechanical perfection that he believed represented humanity's true destiny among the stars. The Iron Hands and their successors stand as living monuments to their Primarch's vision, their augmented forms and systematic approach to warfare serving as constant reminders that strength must be earned through the systematic elimination of weakness in all its forms. Though Ferrus Manus fell on the killing fields of Istvan V, his teachings continue to guide his sons in their eternal war against the enemies of mankind, their mechanical hands still reaching toward the perfect fusion of flesh and steel that their gene father died, believing represented humanity's ultimate salvation.